Great. Good evening and welcome to the 25th meeting of fiscal year 2025 for the Milton Planning Board. At this time, I would like to call the meeting to order and begin by introducing the members of the Planning Board and our staff. If we could introduce yourselves. Cheryl, if you want to start us off.
Sure. Cheryl Tagaya, Secretary.
Okay. Maggie.
Maggie Oldfield, member.
Sean.
Sean Fahey, member.
Great. And Jim will be joining us shortly, and we'll introduce him when he comes in. And I am Meredith Hall, serving as chair. Tonight, we have with us our staff, Cheyenne.
Cheyenne Frazier, Assistant Director of Planning.
And Julia.
She's not here yet.
Coming?
She's
Not
running
yet.
a little late.
Okay, that's great. All right. Then we can keep moving with our administrative items. We have minutes that we had deferred the February 10th. We had January 23rd, actually. We had not approved those. And then January 25th or 28th, sorry. So February 10th, January 28th, and January 23rd. I did note that Cheryl picked up on February 10th an item to adjourn. I went back and watched the tape, and it was actually on a motion by Jim and seconded by Maggie. So I would suggest that we amend that set of minutes, but everything else I thought looked okay.
Since I'm going to abstain from the 10th,
Right.
can we do the two motions, Meredith? So
Sure.
if everyone
Do this separately.
had any other comments on the minutes though, first?
I'm good with the 28th and the 23rd, the two that you had sent out, Cheryl. I have no further comments. I think they're good from my perspective.
And you too, Maggie?
Yep, and I agree. Yes.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from February 23rd and February 28th.
It's
as
January.
amended. I'm sorry, January 23rd and January 28th as amended.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we'll do roll call since we're on Zoom. All in favor. Cheryl?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Maggie?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you. And now if I could have a motion to accept the minutes from February 10th. Cheryl is going to abstain. So it's Sean or Maggie, if I could have a motion in a second.
I'll make a motion to approve February 10 minutes.
And I will second.
Okay. And roll call on that. Sean?
Yes.
Maggie?
Yes.
Cheryl, I guess we should just document your vote for the
Abstain.
and myself, yes. Great. Thank you for the approval of those minutes. We then have our next discussion of our next meeting dates. We do have a meeting set up, just a pre-meeting before town meeting. And Julia's not here yet, but Cheyenne, do you know if it was 7:15 or 7:30? Do we have a time on that?
Let me check because I know
Or
we were talking
7?
about
She might
that
have even done 7.
earlier. We have 7:15,
Okay, great. That's perfect.
room 243.
And 243?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right. And we have that set up for the 24th and 25th. We then have, we were able to get confirmation for the Milton Arts Center to do our MAPC, a public forum for the overlay zoning for East Milton Square on March 11th. So Cheyenne, in your update, maybe you can talk a little bit about the publicity and how we're getting the word out for that.
Sure.
Okay. And then we have our next regular scheduled meeting will be on March 13th. So shortly after our forum. Okay, so staff update, Cheyenne, if you want to.
Sure.
Chase up
So
with
as
those.
Meredith mentioned, March 11th, we will be having a forum at the Milton Arts Center with our consultants from MAPC, Josh Fiala. He's come a couple of times to do presentations with us. In terms of publicity, we are going to be getting it posted on the town website, town Facebook page, other town-related Facebook pages, and the Milton scene, but we are waiting on that a little bit just because we'd like to make it hybrid. So we sent it back to Josh to add that to the flyer, and once that's all settled up, that'll be sent out and posted for everybody.
It's also been posted to the Milton Times. They know about it, so.
Great. Good. Yeah, we want that to be it's an important forum, and we want the opportunity to have community input on that. We should also probably send the flyer when we have it to the East Milton Neighborhood Association. And they can
Yes,
distribute it
I
to their
think
members.
Julia got in touch with Andy D'Amato.
Yeah, I
Um,
sent an email to Andy D'Amato. I haven't heard back from him, but we
Okay.
don't have a list of like a list of participants in the East Milton Association. So hopefully he'll spread the word.
Great. That's
And
terrific.
also maybe send it to the Chamber of Commerce.
Yes,
We'll do
that
that.
was a suggestion that Cheryl had made. Great. Well, it sounds like the planning department is on it, so thank you very much. And so anything else, Cheyenne?
Yes. So for agenda 9, we have the floodplain bylaw discussion. I had edited that back in January, and I was in touch with Eric Carlson from DTR. I've been sending it back and forth with him, just getting edits because he wanted to review every town's draft before we send it to town meeting. So I had sent our final draft this morning. He got back to me saying everything looks good, just if we had any edits. Obviously send it back to him just to look over. So when we get there, that's already been like looked at. So we just need to get that done to send to the warrant, which I believe is like sometime next week.
Great. Perfect. Yeah, because we'll have both of our overlay zoning for East Milton in this to submit. So as soon as the warrant committee finishes with their work on this special town meeting, they can get started on something new. Okay, great. So now if we have the applicant for the A&R for 572 Harland Street, we can invite them to join us.
So I was speaking with the person who was doing the plan, and I told him about having the attorney, but he never mentioned the name. So I'm not sure if the attorney is here or not.
Okay.
And Meredith, before we begin, I just would like to make a disclosure that this property is located within the Hillside Neighborhood Association, which I am a part of, both personally and professionally. But I don't think my relationship with the property owners would interfere with my ability to make a fair and balanced decision. And because I don't have any financial interest in this agenda item, I feel as if I'm able to participate in the discussion. Thank you.
Great. So if the applicant from 572 Harland, if you could raise your hand so we can invite you to join us and be a panelist. I am not seeing any hands.
Me either.
Yeah. Who was your contact, Cheyenne, for this application?
I had been talking to Steve DeRoche. He and I have been talking
Okay.
pretty much the entire application process.
Okay, great. All right, why don't we keep an eye open for Steve, or let's see, yeah. they may be joining us later, but I think we should keep moving through our agenda, and we will just look for the applicant to raise their hand. And Cheyenne, just if you want to just keep watch of the attendees
Mhm.
in the event they do show up and raise their hand.
Sure.
Okay, so and I see that Jim has joined us. So welcome, Jim. Glad to have you.
Hello.
Hello, great to have you. And so now I think at this time, we can open the public hearing, site plan approval for 0 Blue Hill Ave, parcel B-7-5, continued from February 13th. And we can invite the team in to join us. Yep, Chris has his hand up, Andrew, Josh, and Scott Thornton. It's like,
Can you hear me?
yes, welcome, Chris. Good
Yes,
evening.
thank you. To start, Chris Fazenden with Viking Development, the applicant for 0 Blue Hill Ave. Thank you guys for squeezing us in tonight. I know you have a lot going on, so I'll try to help move things along. We met last week. There was a couple takeaway items. I submitted a comment response for about 6 things. Not sure if you guys want me to run through them. If you guys had a chance to review and have questions, happy to kind of handle that any way you'd like.
Yeah, if you'd like to run through those real briefly, that would be great.
Mhm. Okay, are you seeing the PDF?
Yes. Okay.
So right off the bat, the first one was our discussions on the window muttons. The elevations were updated to have that 8-panel sort of double hung design across the building, all 4 elevations. That was submitted as part of the package. So hopefully everyone got a chance to look at that. If there's any questions, let me know, but I think that's landed in a good spot.
Right.
I will point out, just because I'm seeing it here now, we did move the 2 circular emblems from those top gables off and kind of kept all the signage on that front main gable there. Second one on this list was retaining wall materials. There was a request to kind of put color and material and texture into this package, just so you had an idea of what the intent was. I've submitted one of each manufacturer that we've talked about through this process. That's now an exhibit and included in our site plan package as well. I made a note that will get included onto our retaining wall plans once those designs are finalized. And then I think the bulk of the remaining items were construction management related. Just to run through them briefly, we updated our pre-construction meeting note to indicate that a meeting with police department is required. Construction hours, we looked through the bylaws and kind of determined Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., Saturday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., and then Sundays, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. This is language straight out of the bylaw. It also notes that construction activities on the interior, fully enclosed building can be conducted outside of those hours. And then a couple notes here at the end regarding, the startup of motor vehicles or equipment prior to hours. I noted in here the deliveries need to occur between those hours as well. And then here at the bottom, just some notes like we discussed about on-site and off-site parking. It'll occur on-site, except for a few select activities like paving where the site may be encumbered with equipment and operations where it won't occur. And then we would obviously find the appropriate means to transport subcontractors and whatnot on, to the off-site locations. So I think that kind of covers the bulk of construction management. 3-week look ahead. I committed in this response to sending out a notice to abutters with an email address, whether my own or something we make up, allowing them to sort of subscribe, give me their info and email information so that we could distribute that 3-week look ahead schedule that we had discussed. And then the last one is the stormwater peer review. Like we had talked about last time, Luke had brought up that The remaining comments in stormwater peer review are minor in nature with no anticipated substantial modification to the site plan that we've looked at today. And with that, we had recommended that the board consider a vote and a condition of approval, kind of tying that to building permit issuance. And that was it.
Great. Thank you for that quick response. Any questions from members of the board?
Meredith, I just have two.
Yeah.
Chris, how are you? Nice to see you again, and thank you for providing the information. Are you committing to using the Canigliaro block that you had submitted?
Yeah, so I think the discussion we had was Canigliaro or natural stone wall solutions were the two that had been brought up, and we would be committed to using them. But the exact block, the exact style, we didn't want to spec something at this point.
Okay. I looking at something that was submitted, I see ledge stone, and ashlar that were outlined in red. So I wasn't sure. That's why I asked.
Yeah, those were the patterns, kind of the styles that we thought would be used.
Okay. Okay, great. And my second question on the construction management changes, I appreciate all the edits you made. One, I'm not sure if I saw, I had suggested that when your contractor is chosen, that you have a pre-meeting, pre-activity meeting, or a pre-start meeting with the building official, the police department, just to finalize your construction management plan. Was that
Yeah, so we specified here the
Perfect.
requirement for Milton Police Department. Outside of that, all those other entities are going to be a requirement for land disturbance.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Great. Other members of the board?
No, I want to say thank you. I appreciate you minimizing the number of signs and consolidating it to the middle of your building. And just as a personal preference, I like a horizontal stone as opposed to a vertical stone. But no, thank you for your answers to the questions, and it was all the material's been in a very easy to read manner, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else?
Yeah, if I may, Meredith,
Yeah.
I Chris, appreciate all your efforts on this. It's great. I appreciate the windows. I think it looks much better the way it is. Thank you for that change. I know it was late. And then if you do go with natural stone wall solutions, the sample I had in mind was more of a rounder fieldstone look. I'm not asking you to change anything, but if you do consider it, if you drive by Pine Gardens Way off of Pleasant Street, the two front retaining walls are made out of that rounder stone look, and it's really nice. Might be more in keeping with the natural environment out there. Just a thought. But thank you for all your accommodations. I think this is going to be a nice looking building.
Great. Yeah, noted. I'll drive by it, as we get into the construction aspect of this and finalize that material. And if its availability works, we'll certainly consider it.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, and Cheryl, did you have any other?
No, just thank you. As we've said it, I think at the other meetings, we appreciate your responsiveness, getting us the materials in advance, your responsiveness to all of our suggestions and considerations. While all of them haven't been incorporated, you did consider all of them, analyze them, and I think the process has worked really well. So I would, Meredith, if you're ready, make a motion to close the public hearing so that we can begin the process of drafting a decision.
Yes, I just was going to ask if there was anyone here from the public who, before we did that, if anyone would like to, from the public would like to comment or have anything that they would like to add. If you could raise your hand, if you are interested in speaking. Okay. I am not seeing any. So I would entertain a motion then, Cheryl, if you'd like to go ahead with that.
I will. So I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for, let me get the exact agenda title, 0 Blue Hill Ave, parcel B-7-5, the Gardner School.
Great. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Terrific. All right, we'll do a roll call since we're on Zoom. Cheryl,
Yes?
Jim,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Maggie,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Thank you for closing that public hearing. Now we'll have to work on our draft. Cheyenne, if you would, I don't know if you would be able to sort of pull up what our decision was for the Goddard School as a framework.
Yeah, let me.
And you
go
don't have to
through-
do it right now. I'm sorry. I
Oh,
should-
okay.
Not right now.
Okay.
But if you would be able to sort of work on a template that we could sort of be looking at, and the documents that we would be including, that we would need to have included as
Sure.
part of that decision, and then if we have that language pulled together, it's probably a very similar template to what we've done before, and we can have town council review that and have the planning board members review it and see if there's anything decision language you would like to have added.
One thing
Sounds
I
good.
would say is that on the conditions, I think there was in the peer review on the stormwater, there may have been a suggested condition or two there. I think we just
Yes.
had that in the construction management plan. So just, we'll need to go through and make sure that those get picked up, those conditions get picked up.
I was actually going to mention that same thing because I had asked Cheyenne, and I was concerned we didn't have the final peer review. But there was language that Chris had pulled up that we used on the Goddard School. So we do have that language on the stormwater. So I don't know if Chris, you have that. We don't have to do it right now, but we can circulate that, and Cheyenne has seen that language. So we will definitely include that.
So would
Yeah,
the
okay.
intent, sorry,
ahead.
Chris. No, I was just going to say, Meredith, would the intent be to have a vote on the decision on the 13th, the next regularly scheduled meeting?
I think we will, depending on how extensively we need to discuss any changes. But if it seems to be including everything that we have done consistent with other projects, I think that we could at least have it on the agenda for a possible vote.
Okay.
So yeah, so we'll try to get that if we can pull together and have town council take a look at that and then have that ready. We should have ample time, sufficient time to be able to have that together for the 13th, I would think. Okay.
Is there a possibility that we could share that back and forth ahead of time to look at conditions that you have developed in hopes of shortening, any discussions come the 13th?
We certainly could share a draft, like Cheyenne, if you want to pull together, in a draft and any additions that the planning board wants to make. We obviously can't discuss it among ourselves, but we could have your comments if you wanted to share your comments with Cheyenne. She could share those with us.
Yeah, it would help to know what you guys are thinking. I've obviously seen Goddard. I've seen Little Sprouts. I don't think there's anything in there that
Yeah.
is too much of a concern to us, but it would just help if I could come prepared with thoughts.
No, certainly. That's fair. Any
Unless-
other thoughts on this process?
Unless, Chris, you want to dig up a lawyer and write it.
It's gonna be the same thing one way or the other, right? If I write it, you guys still have to review it. So I think it's better that we use your template.
Okay.
All right, that sounds good. So we'll plan to have that draft ready in advance of the 13th meeting, so we can have input from the board members and share that with Chris for comment.
And then I provided Cheyenne with a drawing log of all the drawings, so that should help.
Great. Okay. All right. Anything else for this evening on the Gardner School?
Don't think so. Like we've
Thank you.
Now, thank you guys. It's been a great
All right.
process. I'm glad we're almost there.
Yeah, good job. Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
You too.
Okay. All right. So next on our agenda is we are going to actually reopen our zoning articles. When I think we talked about this at the last meeting, but we had decided to have a follow-up meeting on the articles and vote on the articles. But we did not continue the public hearing. So this is more of a formality that we're going to open a public hearing for the site plan approval, zoning map and accessory dwelling unit articles. And I would then I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing on that. So
So
with that,
Meredith,
yes,
before we close the public hearing, we did get comments back today, and I wanted to see that we would have time to address those. And
yeah, I did want
that's how we want to address those.
exactly. So just so what Cheryl is referring to, which was hot off the press, it came in at the very end of the day. I asked Cheyenne to send it out to everybody as soon as possible. This was the sort of the Mass Lawyers unit that Peter Mello had asked to review. They sort of went through it with a fine-tooth comb. They do sometimes flag things that might be in question. There were a few items, but I have not spoken to Peter Mello about them or Tom Caldwell. At this time, the warrant is closed, so we could not make changes to the article. It would need to be the warrant committee's recommendation. So I think we should, what I would like to do is consult with Peter Mello. Some of the things that we could discuss, like some of the things that were definition related, I believe we took from their regulations. So I'm not sure about that, why there was a discrepancy on some of those things. So I would just sort of like to get clarification maybe from Peter Mello on, are some items just suggested changes, or there were a few things that I think that we could change, but it would have to be the warrant committee. And I think it's, as long as it's within scope, we would also want to make sure that any changes that we would be making would keep the article within scope.
So I think we're really going to need clarification on that as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Because the level of question, I think, raises for me whether the article needs more work, and we would want to suggest that it come back to us for further study. Because with these kind of open questions, I would like to have Peter Mello speak to the board, maybe Monday before at our pre-town meeting.
I agree.
So we could get his opinion about that.
I agree. Yep. Yeah, because if it is, if it becomes so many changes that we were, or the level of change.
Normally the town meeting members would have an opportunity to review the changes in advance. This would be a lot of changes, and they wouldn't have no time to review them in advance. So it's a little, I think the timing is difficult, honestly.
Yeah. And that came up this morning. We discussed that briefly. I met with the other chairs of the other boards, and Peter Mello was there, and with Tom Caldwell and Bob Hiss, just doing a run through. And that was a question I had, how they would handle doing a green sheet at that late time. So let's do that. Let's do that. I'll check with Peter Mello and see what his recommendation is, if we should, and if he could come speak to us at our pre-meeting so we can make a determination on whether to pull that back, or if these are things that can be addressed, the warrant committee can suggest some changes.
So my understanding is when you pass a zoning article, it goes to the AG, and the AG can take up to 90 days to review it. So I think this process is a good process, having them review it prior. However, because we are on such a tight time frame, we know that the ADU law is in effect. Do you think, and it's not what I really like to do, but do you think the recommendation should still be to pass it as written, and then in May at our next town meeting, we can make all the suggested changes?
I think that's something we should discuss with Peter Mello, Maggie, on Monday before town meeting.
Yeah, I agree, Maggie. I would like to try if we can to pass it. But we would want to get sort of clarification as to what changes the warrant committee could recommend at this time without being out of scope, and just making sure we get some clarification on some of those items. Some things I think would be fairly easy to address in those, like there were a couple of typos that,
I did quickly review it, and to your point, I thought there was some things which were easy to correct. And I don't think it would be too much for the average town meeting member to digest.
Mhm.
So I would my suggestion would be to try to pass it in February, if possible.
All right, so I can deliver that message, but I have not talked to Peter again, and he just had received it and sent it right over as soon as he had received it. So we want to make sure it's a solid article, but if there's minor things that can be tweaked, I think particularly with the definitions, if we could get clarification on that. So, all right, so I'll have a follow-up call, and I'll communicate with Cheyenne on what the recommendation is, and have Cheyenne email everyone sort of an update on this, so we're not left floating, because we are unfortunately under it's a really tight time frame.
So then my question is, do we need to keep the public hearing open on the ADUs until Monday?
Well, we can't make any changes. So for us to keep the public hearing open, the warrant has been closed. So we wouldn't be able to make any changes at this point. We could accept their recommendations, but there wouldn't be any new changes that we could make to the article. So I'm not sure if it's necessary to keep the public hearing open. Does that make sense?
So it's just a formality to close the public
It's a
hearing?
formality to close a public hearing because it had not been formally closed previously. And I would just to, we put in there just a formal, during the public hearing, our vote was taken outside of a public hearing. It was on the agenda so we could discuss it. So I would like to entertain having a new vote on those zoning articles to be submitted, subject to town council.
So in any event, the planning board would have to take a vote on the warrant committee's recommendation.
Right. Correct. Because the warrant has closed at this time.
Yep. So I'm just trying to think through the process. And Cheryl's point, is there a benefit to keeping it open? Which I'm not sure if there is or not.
So thinking about what's been done in the past, there have been green sheet changes for zoning articles after the public hearing has closed, but I don't think they're extensive. I don't think they've been extensive. So the question becomes, how extensive are these? I don't think it hurts to keep the ADU open until Monday and ask Peter Mello about it, and we could close the other two, right? Close the public hearing for the other two? Or are they all considered one? Actually, maybe we can't do that either because it's not on the agenda for Monday, right? And it's too late to revise the agenda. All right, so I think that answers that.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for the 3 zoning articles, which is the site plan approval, the accessory dwelling unit, and the overlay district maps.
Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, roll call. Cheryl,
Yes,
Maggie,
yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Sean,
You're muted, Sean.
Thanks, Jim. Apologize. Yes.
and myself. Yes. Great. Thank you. And I will get, we will get an update sent out to everyone and invite Peter to come and join us at our pre-meeting on Monday to make that final determination. Okay, great. So now let's move to our discussion of the HLC comment letters on MBTA community zoning. It's actually on MBTA regulations, but if we can, Cheyenne, we have a couple of different documents, and I appreciate everybody working on this. I know it's been a sort of a quick time frame to pull this together. I had submitted some language, and I know, and then Jim and Cheryl and Maggie also have submitted things. So, Cheyenne, I know you were working on sort of pulling up a document that included everything, so we could sort of, we could review that. If you could pull that up, that would be great. And while she's doing this, great. Okay.
They're in order of how they came into my email.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. So what I did like about this is that I thought a lot of the things that Jim had mentioned were also incorporated in what others had submitted as well. So maybe if we continue to look through them, I think we may see Jim's comments incorporated in other language. So
I might be able to save us a little bit of time. My comments kind of acknowledge that we're a 25% rapid transit classification, and then sort of back into the reasons why I want us to be reclassified as a 10%. Whereas Meredith's comments are much stronger, where they don't acknowledge the 25% and they ask us to address the statute. And I think my comments detract from that argument. So I'm wondering if I should just pull this whole first page that I wrote and maybe submit it as a citizen to not take away from Meredith's letter or this argument, for lack of a better term. That's just
all right. I appreciate that, Jim. That might be helpful, but I think it's good for you to send it as a citizen, as having your separate comments as well.
Yeah, I mean, I still think they're great thoughts, but I think that the way you word yours is just much better.
Okay.
So Cheyenne, do you want to just delete my
Sure.
page and a half, whatever my comments are?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Meredith,
And then Cheryl had her hand raised.
Yeah. So I think that the comments that the 4 of us have put together are going to be pretty hard to reconcile into one document tonight. So it might be best to submit individual comments. I mean, the select board has submitted what they call the Town of Milton's comment letter. So that's apparently the official comment letter. They sent that to us for review. I think it was Thursday evening. It was a holiday weekend, and then they voted on it on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, I really have a hard time thinking that we're going to come to an agreement on what we should include. But I'd like to make a couple of comments because I'd like for the public to hear these comments too. what you prepare or what you supplied, Meredith, I think includes a lot of what Mr. Doherty has submitted to us. And a lot of it relates to the action plan and the validity of the emergency regulations or the law itself. Whereas this comment letter, I feel, is intended to be comments on the actual guidelines or regulations that HLC has put out, for which comment letters or comments are due tomorrow. So we know that the court ruled that the act delegation of the authority to HLC to write the guidelines is legal. And I think our focus should really be on the guidelines, not on the act or the validity of the emergency regulations or the law itself. With respect to rapid transit classification, which is something that's been talked about almost exclusively rather than other aspects of the guidelines, the town wrote to the MBTA in August of 2023 seeking an explanation of the classification of the Mattapan trolley. And in a response letter dated September 8th of 2023, it was confirmed that the Mattapan trolley is one of 2 light rail lines that operate as part of the MBTA's fixed route service. The other one is the Green Line. The letter explains that fixed route modes include bus, light rail, heavy rail, commuter rail, and ferry in accordance with federal definitions and in accordance with the MBTA service delivery policy, which is adopted by its board. That letter also states, in classifying transit modes, consideration by the MBTA is not given to destination, e.g. whether the modes include service to downtown Boston, nor capacity or service delivery levels. Rather, the designation is a technical one based on characteristics of the vehicle, such as whether it operates on a fixed guideway, uses a designated right-of-way, or uses a fixed catenary system. While quality and frequency of service are certainly an important part of the rider's experience and are areas in which the MBTA is seeking to improve, they are not material to the designation of the Mattapan line as a light rail. So communities with Green Line service, which is also the light rail, have not challenged their classification as rapid transit. Only Milton has. As I mentioned, the select board focused the entirety of its comment letter on challenging the classification. I think we should focus on other aspects of the guidelines that we may have agreement on. These changes could put us in a much better position to comply with the rapid transit classification or another classification if that is something that HLC agrees to. But if we don't spend time talking about these other aspects of the guidelines, I think it would be a wasted opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl.
I agree with Cheryl, at our last meeting, really no advance notice. Our board came up with many things we were in agreement on and that we wanted to be reviewed by HLC. And so I think the planning board should submit a letter. I think there are things in Jim's comments and Cheryl's comments and my comments and Meredith's comments that they overlap. So I think it is beneficial for the Milton Planning Board to submit a letter. And we start with the things that we can agree on. And then we just move on from there. So I think maybe we just go on down the line on the technical stuff at this point in time and get that out of the way.
So Cheryl, I almost see this, I do feel like it's stronger coming from the planning board. And what I had presented, I just have a couple of little things I wanted to add, is sort of a narrative of where we are. And it is, you're right, it's very much an explanation of the position that Milton has been put in regarding the action plan, the requirement of the action plan. It addresses, the emergency regulations, it puts in a lot of significant detail to, yes, it is our argument. And it's very statute based. I know everything that you read off, was all about the regulations. This is the regulations need to not expand on the statute. And that is what the issue is that the regulations with respect to Milton are beyond the scope of what is outside the statute. And
So right there, yeah, I can't agree with that, because the SJC said that they agreed that the statute
the law yes.
allows for HLC, which it says shall promulgate the guidelines.
Correct.
And so they must go beyond the statute. So if not, then why is that included in the statute, and why did the court rule the way they did? So I can't,
because the statute is legal and promulgating guidelines. Yeah. All right. We'll agree to disagree then. So I would like to submit the draft, and I think what I was going to suggest, because I think they're complementary, is what I had provided was more of a narrative. And then I think what you present and what Maggie has presented are can be a follow-up, and it would be further suggested modifications would be how you could title it. And so we could have really three parts to this. The part that I submitted and the map, but have before the map, the part 3, further suggested modifications, and put in what you have provided. If you would still like to, Cheryl, I think it's beneficial coming from our board. But if you want to submit your language as a separate citizen, I can't support.
I can't support the language that you've provided, which is basically a regurgitation of the same thing that the select board has put forward, which is that we're not a rapid transit community, and trying to use the law rather than the guidelines as the basis for it, which again is, I think, an argument that Mr. Doherty has made to the board on a number of occasions. If we took the idea that the developable area within half mile of whatever transit station it is times 15 is our requirement, and let's say the state decides, or HLC and the courts agree, that we are a rapid transit community, we have 404 acres of developable station area within the trolley stations. And if we did the math on that at 15 units an acre, that'd be over 6,000 units of zone capacity. So I think we have to be careful what we're arguing for here, without having thought through what the consequences could be if we lose this particular argument. So I cannot vote on that aspect of the comment letter.
So Cheryl, that the number of acres within a developable area, the only thing that triggers is whether you have to develop within that area or if you can develop outside of that area. So that it was their regulations was 100 acres of developable land, and we talked about that.
But no, Meredith, that's in this letter. It's in what you supplied. It's
right.
Making an argument that we're going to be 15 units an acre times 37.5 acres, which is the developable station area within the commuter rail stations, and coming up with 562.5 or 563 units. So that's the argument that's being made.
That's what the statute says.
No, it doesn't, because if you look at the statute doesn't say you do the math that way.
A reasonable size within
15 units per acre times however many acres you have.
It doesn't say that you do the math times the developable area. I mean, think about that. Think about how that math might work in other places, and how it would work if we're considered a rapid transit community. And I'm looking at the statute right now. It doesn't say that that's the way to do the math. So we can argue or disagree about it. It's wrong.
Yeah, okay.
I want to point out the reason, so people who are watching or listening can hear that because you haven't gone through the language of this, and this is, I want to point out some of the things that are in the language that you want to submit, and those things, and I want to point out why I don't support those things.
Meredith, before we go on, I want Cheryl to please clarify for me and for anybody else listening what you just, what you're inferring or stating about 6,000 units.
All right, so
Because
the argument that's made in, if we want to go, I'll find, it's made in several places in what Meredith submitted. Talking about explicit wording, saying that Milton, if I'm looking at, I'm not sure what page it is. It was the bottom of the second page. It says, therefore, Milton can fully comply with Section 3A by implementing a zoning ordinance or bylaw that provides for 15 multifamily units per acre within the total of 37.5 acres of developable land in Milton that is located not more than 0.5 miles from the Fairmont, Reedville, and Blue Hill Ave MBTA commuter rail stations. And then it says, and it refers to util's calculation. And then it says the statutes, words, and math apply. The Chapter 40A, Section 3A statutes explicit wording, therefore, yields the statutorily required total Milton Section 3A multifamily zoning to be 563 multifamily units, which is 15 times 37.5, and then round it up. So, but that's based on, so that's saying that's how you do it. Now, if I look at what I pulled from the actual language, it says an MBTA community shall have a zoning ordinance or bylaw that provides for at least one district of reasonable size in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right. And then it goes on about, however, that such multifamily housing shall be without age restrictions and shall be suitable for families with children. For the purposes of this section, a district of reasonable size shall, 1, have a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre, subject to any further limitations imposed by Section 40 of Chapter 131 and Title 5 of the State Environmental Code established pursuant to Section 13 of Chapter 21A. And B, be located not more than 0.5 miles from a commuter rail station, subway station, ferry terminal, bus station, if applicable. So it doesn't say, it doesn't tie the calculation of the units per acre to the developable area, because it doesn't even use the words developable area here. And we know those words came from the guidelines themselves. So if you use the logic of 15 units times developable acres, UTIL has also provided us with a calculation that there are 404 developable station area acres within a half mile of the trolley stations. So if you apply the logic of what's in the comment letter that Meredith submitted for commuter rail and developing what your required zone capacity is to those 404 acres, you get 6,000, over 6,000. So that's why I said I think we need to be careful about what we're arguing in terms of how a reasonable size is determined, because the guidelines have provided a different way of determining that. And this is something which is an interpretation of the statute, but that doesn't come from the guidelines. Yeah, we're here to talk about the guidelines.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure that we're careful in what we're saying. The most extreme requirement would be 25% of the current housing stock, not 6,000 units.
I'm just saying that the logic that's being applied to an argument.
I know what you're saying, but for the people that are listening, if people are listening to you and imagining that we may be forced to add 6,000 units, I just think you should be really careful in what you're suggesting to the public.
Right. All right. So the zone capacity at 25% is 2,461 units.
Exactly.
That's based on 25% But that comes out of the guidelines as well, Sean. So we're keep
understand.
mixing the law and the guidelines. That's what I'm trying to point out, that the comment letter here is saying we only need to pay attention to the law.
Yeah.
And the law doesn't have the 25% or 10% or anything. So this logic that's in this comment letter is saying that we're just going to do the math this way because we don't follow the guidelines. They're not proper. I think that's a mistake, and I'm trying to point out why I think that's a mistake.
Okay. There's an awful lot that's contentious all the way around. My opinion is we should submit as a planning board a document that takes a position that is consistent with what our select board submitted. And I understand you don't agree with that, Cheryl, because it doesn't represent your point of view. But as far as a planning board who should be submitting something, my opinion is that what we submit should be consistent with the select board and support the position that they've taken.
Well, then they have not included this in their letter. This language about how this calculation is done is not in their letter.
It
So
doesn't have to be in their letter.
I don't see how we're going
Does
to
it-
make
It doesn't have to be in their letter.
it's not consistent with it either.
It's also not what you're suggesting. What you're suggesting is not even close to what the position that they've taken.
I'm suggesting we don't touch whether we're rapid transit or not. I'm suggesting that we go through all the other things, which I think we have found to be problematic, whether it's the size, the minimum subdistrict size, the definition of multifamily, to the way zone capacity is calculated on a density basis, whether you're including roads and so forth, things that I put in the comment letter. I think there's things that Jim had identified too with respect to excluded land that tie into that, how much land that we can actually have available to us. And it affects our density calculation as well, because that gets included. That's what I think we should focus our comment on. They already have the argument for the town with respect to rapid transit. We're not adding
They don't
anything
have
new
it.
to the argument if we're not adding all the other comments.
Yeah, but
And
we're pursuing the argument, Cheryl. So we've been on this track for a while now. And to not pursue it at this point, I think would be a mistake. So I'm in
Cheryl, yeah.
Meredith's letter for that reason alone, not to mention the fact that it makes some great arguments.
And
So Cheryl, I would like to include your recommendations too as part of this, because I agree with a lot of what you have put in there.
And I believe our letter would be consistent with that of the select board in saying that we recognize that we are not a rapid transit. So where both boards are consistent in that point of view. So like, can we first go through and figure out on the things that we agree on?
There's many more pages here, I think, devoted to the action plan. We're not even talking about action plan. We're talking about guidelines. We're talking about whether it's emergency regulations were properly promulgated. That's not guidelines. So I think at a minimum, it's got to focus on the guidelines. That's what we're here to talk about.
But I think this is a narrative of where we are right now, and that we should be taking, I do want us to be able to write an action plan. I want us to be able to come to an agreement, with HLC. And I would like to see the regulations properly promulgated and have us have input with those regulations. But I think
That's
there's
what
a
we're
bigger
here to do.
conversation. Yep, I know, but I do think we should include this. And then I did have two things that I just wanted to amend on page 4, Cheyenne. If you could pull that. Yeah, sorry, that's page 1. Scrolling down, yeah. And it's a bold paragraph that begins with the chapter 40A. We keep under therefore.
Is it this one?
Yeah, bottom of page 4.
Like page 4 of Meredith, or like literally page
Yeah,
4?
let me just
Oh,
here.
page- Meredith, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Thanks for
Statute
the call.
explicit. Yeah, sorry. 1, 2.
But under number
Next page.
2,
Yeah, furthermore, follow, let's see, it's actually after therefore. Let's just respaced it a little bit. Hold on.
I think it should say units, not acres.
Yes, that's what I'm looking for. Yes.
So I think it's the
Mm.
last paragraph of Meredith's page 4 in bold.
Okay. In bold.
Right.
Oh.
Last
1,
paragraph of
2,
Meredith's page 4.
3, 4.
Just
no,
following therefore, yeah.
I think
It's in section 2.
2, paragraph 3.
Okay.
There too, yeah. Yes. Therefore, it's the next paragraph after the therefore paragraph. That, yes. Yes, so in here, acres should be units. There, that word, yeah, should be units.
And there again, yeah.
Yeah,
Nice job.
units, yeah, okay. That was the only thing. So why don't we move down and go through what Cheryl had, and then what Maggie have added? Yeah. Okay. So Cheryl, you're first. So your focus, Cheryl, is on the trolley. So that is
You're muted.
Oh.
Cheryl.
unmuted?
No, Cheryl.
Oh, Cheryl is okay. Yeah, so if we scroll
Sorry
down
about
to
that.
what your
Yeah,
first,
if you could, can you zoom that in a little bit, Cheyenne? So this portion of it is focused on the tribe, but all of the comments are not
Right.
focused. So this piece is talking about the neighborhood that's really closest to the trolley and describing it, because I want to set the context that some of the things that we suggest would make these changes. If they made these changes, it would be more reasonable to add housing in this area in the way in which we think makes most sense, which is infill. I think the more we look at the guidelines, that they favor larger developments on larger parcels, but we don't have that. So I think it's important to point it out and to give examples of that.
So I don't mind this narrative if we had if we had a section 3 further suggested modifications, or however the board decides to determine. And then you could start with this, we could introduce with this narrative, the section 3.
Well, but the thing is, if we're arguing that we're not a rapid transit community, then the location, and if we're arguing that we're a commuter rail community, then we don't need to zone in this area whatsoever. But I don't mind including it still, because I'm not convinced that it's going to come back that we're a commuter rail community. So I'd rather have the comments there than not there.
Well,
but
if we are
I
an
do want to
adjacent,
point that out.
yeah, and if we are adjacent, we can put the development anywhere.
Well, it kind of continues to go back to which of the guidelines we like and which of them we don't. But this particular neighborhood is comprised of a lot of mostly single and 2-family homes, except on the ends where we've talked about being higher density already, because there's multifamily in those locations. So if you scroll down a little bit further, that's one of that map or that plan is from UTIL's, which shows the size of the lot. So in that commentary, I referenced the numbers of small lots, small parcels that are within this area. That ties back to that description. And then the first suggested change is the definition of multifamily housing, because as we know, it's tied to a single building with 3 units or 2 buildings with 2 or more units. So that would be 4 in order for it to be classified or considered multifamily. But here, what's the difference really if you're still allowing for 3 units of housing, if you can retain a single family that exists or retain a 2 family that exists and add 2 or 1 units to it, you still are netting 3 units. So the suggested change is to have the definition be 3 dwelling units on the same lot, no matter how they're configured. And I point out that their definition, I think, incentivizes the demolition of existing homes, which is something that we don't want to do. So that's the first one.
Okay, so I agree with this, and I think it should be included in our letter. Because I do agree with Cheryl's rationale in that, in my opinion, worst case scenario, we are stuck with 25%. We want to be able to protect. So, and these regulations are not just for Milton, it's for all the other 177 communities as well. So maybe we are helping another town as well. So I think that Cheryl's number 1 we should include as maybe, to Meredith's point, as modification number 1.
Okay.
I would agree. Okay.
Then if you want to go to the next one, the gross density definition. I think we've all talked about how some of our neighborhoods, actually, if you do math based on a parcel by parcel basis, they seem to be 15 units an acre, but when we do run it through the compliance model, it's less than that. And I think it's because, number 1, we might have some, they're not all the same size lots, and we're limiting it to 3 units a lot. So we're getting some delusion of the density, but we're also getting the delusion through the definition, which requires inclusion of public ways and also parks and recreational, civic, and other non-residential uses. So I just used this one example, which is off of Elliott Street, to show that if you took out the roadway, the public right-of-way, in the total acreage, you could get your density calculation is 19.5 units an acre, whereas with the definition that they have, it's 16.4 units. And so, we're not getting as much credit in this area on the density side, which means we're having to have higher density someplace else. So I think if they change this definition to exclude the public rights of way and these other uses, then it would be better suited for areas that are already developed at a higher density, like with small lots, though, like the Elliott Street corridor.
I thought the model backed out roads.
No,
On that?
if you look at I looked at the guidelines again, and the definitions that's in these guidelines says it's included.
No, the definitions made, but I could have swore Tim way back said they pull out the roads.
I didn't see it in rereading all of the guidelines, but I could have missed it.
Yeah, it might not be in the guidelines. It might just be within the model. I could have swore it. Well, it's all right.
Then I do feel like this should be labeled modification number 2. I think it's we should include it in our comment letter. I think it kind of is a nod to what Jim's comments were in his that he provided to us. So I think we should adopt that in our letter.
Yeah, it definitely isn't going to hurt.
Just from I agree too. I agree with both of these, the 2 points here that Cheryl's brought up. Can we as a board just agree on these or disagree on these as we go through them, just so we don't have to go back again?
So
Yes.
Yep, so far, 1, 2, and 3, I think we all agree on.
Okay.
So 3 is the sub-district that which we haven't
Sorry,
talked
we haven't
about
gotten
yet.
through. Yes, I had read it before, so I.
Yeah, okay,
And I agree on it too, because I touched on this in my comments.
right. And I think we've all
Okay.
talked about this throughout.
Yep.
And I just used an example of the paper mill site. So we don't have to go through the detail of it, but 5 acres for these minimum sub-districts for anybody who's watching is we found to be problematic and excludes parcels or areas that we think would actually be good opportunities for adding housing.
And I agree with that, and not to jump forward to what my comments, but I have a series of comments that the same language should apply, which maybe it could be used here too. And my language basically is it's an opportunity for the town to work with HLC. And so some language could be something like the process by which an MBTA community may seek any limited exception to compliance with 760 CMR 72.00 while still complying with the overall intent, purpose, and goals of MGL 40A Section 3A. So
One thing I would say, Maggie, what you just said before, though, was about having these changes apply to other communities. If you have it on, everyone have to go through for some kind of special treatment, I don't know that they would buy into that. That's something that I think that they were not interested in from what Tim told us before. So if we keep it something that could apply to other communities, like by reducing the size, I think it's more likely that they would consider it.
and so was it on yours, or did I read it? Did you say lower it from 5 to 3? Because
Yes.
okay, so
If
but
you
it
scroll
could-
down a little bit, Cheyenne, you can see that.
so it could be, so 4 acres would be okay. 3 acres would be okay. What about 2.5 acres? So as you know, Milton is comprised of a lot of smaller acres. So even to assemble 2 acres could be like 4 to 6 lots. So I just wasn't sure if the 3 acres was the correct.
Yeah, I was considering 2.5, but I also know that they didn't want it to be too small, so I'm open to changing that to something less.
I mean, I understand why they wanted 5 in some communities where there is open space, but where there are communities that are already built out, like Milton is, as I said, 2 acres is a lot of land. Might not be a lot of land in Carlisle, but it is a lot of land here in Milton.
How does the board feel on that?
So I don't,
I wouldn't be opposed to going down to 2 and seeing what happens.
Or 2.5?
2.5.
Yeah, I could support either 2 or 2.5. And I agree with Maggie saying there's 177 communities. The 5 acre minimum is definitely not a reasonable application to 177 communities. These communities are all different.
like if you go to Winthrop, they're even more constrained.
Exactly.
Well, the idea that you have to have contiguous sub-districts, also, the smaller you make it means that you can tailor them, a little bit differently, where some you might allow a little more height or a little more density than others, but the 5 acres means you have to have all of it the same in that 5 acres. And this example right here shows that the paper mill site, which we know already has zoning to allow for multifamily, but if you make it MBTA communities, you have to try and jump across DCR land, which they don't allow, and then pick up some single family. And so it's by their definitions, they're making this not able to be done. But
yeah, it's too restrictive.
Right.
Yep.
So I'm fine. I think 2 acres. If we're going to reduce it, it seems like 2 acres. I could support 2 acres.
Okay, so 2
All
acres,
right.
we're all in agreement.
Yep.
Yep.
And then number 4 was trying to address the concern about not losing our business districts. And I know we were restricted in how many units that we could have and mandatory mixed use districts. I wasn't sure how to best accomplish that in a very specific language, but I tried to explain the challenge and made a suggestion that's kind of general, but hopefully is understood what the goal is.
No, I agree with that. The only thing is the language of trolley.
Where's that?
Here
Charlie Station's the first line.
it's
First line, trolley station.
yeah, trolley stations and also the trolley catchment area. So that's very specific, to Milton. So I would use a transit station. Because we don't know if it's a commuter rail, subway, ferry station. Because we're trying to make it as
Transit station's fine. I mean, we're using Milton example here, but because we're calling out East Milton Square too, but because of an example.
Yeah, I would just say transit.
Yeah, and then the next line too, we would put transit too.
So lose the word station on the first line there, within a half mile of transit, period.
And really, we're trying to promote transit-oriented development.
That's fine. To change from trolley to transit.
Cool, thank you.
And it really should be changed in all, wherever there's even back up with the district size of 5 acres. So Cheyenne, anywhere you see trolley, it should be replaced with
Transit.
And then number 5. You remember when Tim had said that he had been authorized by the select board to ask HLC to give an early indication of whether they would accept the Granite Ave South as an East Milton Square as suitable locations for sub-districts. So rather than have it be something where that has to be sort of sought, I thought it should be clear in the guidelines that it's acceptable, where we already know in the guidelines, again, this is related to the rapid transit, because half of the developable station areas in Boston, Milton's able, and other communities, if they have the same kind of situation, are able to have sub-districts outside of that half-mile area. But I thought it would be helpful to have in the guidelines an indication that it's acceptable to have sub-districts located in areas that have MBTA bus service.
So Cheryl, I was on a roll with agreeing with you. But I'm not on this one. And also because, mostly because if you look at the regulations, and the statute, bus service, it has been, not included, anywhere. It's been only the Silver Line was specifically included. And I think if we're just looking at ourselves, which goes against what I just said about looking at all communities, hopefully if we are categorized as an adjacent community, we will be able to look outside different districts. So for here in this situation, Milton personally, we don't really need this because it already applies to us.
Only if we're not a rapid transit. Because they still have to approve the sub-district location outside of the half mile.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel like because it didn't at one point, they had bus service in it and then they took it out and defined it as just the silver line. So I feel like we're gonna be creating bigger problems for other towns when they've specifically removed bus service from previous guidelines. So I wouldn't support that necessarily. Well, I wouldn't support it, period.
Could we just change what the request is? This is to allow sub-districts in,
Outside transit,
yeah,
yeah, that's what, maybe we just,
without restriction, I guess.
without
because-
restriction, yeah.
Because I don't like the restriction that we have to go back to them and get approval for the location is what I'm trying to get at.
Right,
But,
and I think we could change
and I
that.
understand your concern, Maggie, that it could open up some other things that I hadn't anticipated, but so I think that change of language would work.
yep, and I like not having to go back. So I do agree with that.
So we would say,
Locations, yeah, without restriction, so.
right,
Take out. Period, yeah. Right. Okay, are we all in agreement on that? Affordability?
All in agreement, yep.
yeah.
I would agree.
I didn't set an amount like you did, Maggie. I'm not sure about how we can get to that when on your comments, but I thought the first thing is to get them to agree to the concept.
Yeah, so I got to mine by looking up the Boston zoning code, which I think they wrote in 2023. So, that's fairly recent.
Okay, when we get there, maybe you can,
So, but we could combine your affordability with my affordability. So that's only where I came up with the 17% was because if Boston is doing it, then I think they're setting a precedent for the rest of us to follow.
yeah, Boston, when they do it, they've done economic analysis to justify, because I know that there was a part of the city that wanted to go to 20 or 22% or even higher. But they did the analysis and they needed to have some kind of a bonus, whether a density bonus or otherwise, in order to make those projects work financially. So I guess the 17%, it may or may not be the right percent for Milton. I mean, I think as a goal, it's a good goal. I don't know if we can mandate it, but why don't we go to your language and
I
start
just was gonna
going
have,
through it.
sorry, I just had one thing. On the affordability is near, we wanted to change trolley to transit. Oh, no, sorry. Just didn't want to forget.
I was consistent with trolley, huh?
Yeah. Great.
And the other thing is you mentioned 10 units and in Boston, they've dropped it to 7 units. So that's what I had in mind, 7 units.
Yeah, we can switch to 7. I don't know if it's as widely acknowledged, because I've heard 10 very widely, but
I mean, I called it up in there.
I understand Boston, but on the other community.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, Boston is has already created a zoning language for it. Why would we recreate the wheel. I like consistency.
I think it all depends on how projects are financed and, you know, what the differential is. If we are in the same, I think, metropolitan area in terms of how the median income is calculated, area median income, which would set the differential between the affordable and the market rate units. You can try for 7, see what they say.
Okay, so Cheryl, was that all of your,
Yes, those are all of mine.
okay?
So
So,
for Cheryl's, we're taking all of them or just 1,
Yes.
2, all of them?
and we made that one change, so yeah,
Yes.
and everybody agreed on that.
Okay.
So then if we, yeah. Want to go down to Maggie's?
So I'd like to apologize to Cheyenne and whoever else was reading as I was editing live. You know, my thought process is you put as much in first and then it's easier to delete. So at one point I had a lot of stuff in there and I've taken them out. So sorry for any confusion I may have caused.
So Maggie, I think I have the before you took it all out.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, sorry that you wasted paper. Sort of like what I did with site plan review.
So Maggie, do you think it's necessary to include all the language like that's included?
So I don't know. So when I was in the middle of writing mine, when yours came over, and I thought, oh, well, Cheryl's way more concise than I was. So I wasn't really understanding how the layout should be. So it's a layout formatting thing.
Mhm, mhm.
So I wasn't sure if I was thinking if I was HLC, how would I want to receive it? So that's why I put, you know, where the regulation is and then just the change. So probably not all of it has to be included. No.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe we just put 72.03, for example, and then 2D in the
Yeah.
suggestion.
And then just remove all the other, yeah.
Right.
Because I was just cutting and pasting it from the regulations.
Right.
So my first edit was 7203 of the regulations, which was the general principle of compliance. And it was letter D. And my concern here was that I thought that parking and ADA accessibility next to a transit station was really important. As I've said before, I was raised with a sister with severe disabilities, and my mother-in-law lives here in Milton and she has MS and she's in a wheelchair. So I'm always looking at things through that perspective. So in D, the regulation says when possible, when I don't think when possible is really under ADA law, but so I got rid of when possible and then kept multifamily zoning districts should be in areas that have safe, accessible, and convenient access to transit stations for pedestrians and bicyclists. And then I add as well as parking for motorists and ADA compliance access for people with disabilities.
I would say compliant access, not compliance.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think it's, I don't know if they're going to agree with them when possible, but I think it's good to address the accessibility and, you know, parking for accessible parking in particular, you know, for for how many motorists, I'm not sure, but having some for people who need, to arrive in a vehicle.
So if you're in a wheelchair,
Right.
you-
You're not going to be walking or taking the bike, right? I get that. So, yeah, I think it's a good thing to flag.
Yep, I would agree.
everyone accept that?
Would
Yeah.
accept it. Okay, number 2. So
So I don't
Going
necessarily,
back to that, I'm sorry, just going back to that, you scroll, it goes 2 and then D. Should it just be sort of 2 and then suggestion, or like, I don't understand the 2 and then D part. I know we cut out a bunch.
yeah, I see what you're
And-
saying. The suggested language.
I think for consistency, we should probably follow the format that was in Cheryl's comments, just so it doesn't appear to be
Mhm.
deviating, right? There's an expression that's in Cheryl's comments that I think says something like that, right? Suggested change.
yep, so that's what I was going to say as well. So edit mine to,
Maybe instead of saying issue, we write suggested change.
Yeah.
But
so that
Yeah.
Cheryl.
I am to sort of figure out the editing, so it looks like.
Yeah, I was
cohesive.
gonna do all that at the end just to make it all cohesive.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Cheyenne.
And then my modification 2 was the affordability. So we sort of discussed that. I did add, also straight from Boston, the partial units and payment in lieu of units.
So that's where you got that amount?
Yeah.
The 17%?
Yeah,
So the only thing I'd say here, maybe you've already changed it. Let me just see. Yeah, it looks like you already changed it, so go. Okay. 'Cause what you had before was something about a developer be willing to do something which would only be after zoning's in place, so you wouldn't want that here. But it looks like you already took that out. Okay.
so as we discussed last week at our last week meeting, we think that if a developer can't create a whole unit, they should make a contribution to our Affordable Housing Trust.
So I guess what you'd want here, can you just go back to that for a second? You want, this requirement would be in our zoning, it wouldn't be in the guidelines. So I guess what you'd want to say here is that the guidelines allow for this payment in lieu of units or partial units. So right at like you have towns may require 17%. So affordable housing in that first red sentence. And the next sentence is, it's more like a zoning requirement, right? So here, town, you could say where the total number, the towns may require that where the total number of units, again, I'm sorry, Cheyenne, no, down in the next sentence, it's not, this particular language sounds like it's a zoning language versus a guideline language.
A regulation, regulation.
Do you see the distinction I'm trying to? So we want to make sure that what you're trying to do can be allowed. We're not saying that it's a requirement, right? Because some towns may not want to put this in.
Yep,
So you say, it could say the applicant may be required to pay instead of shall pay. Then that would get at the regulation, I think.
Yeah.
And then I think you don't put the payment part. That would go in your zoning,
Yeah.
that last sentence. Do you agree with that, Maggie?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So let's just look at that one more time.
Yeah, because this language came from Boston zoning, so that's to your point.
You might need the word be after the to, so in the second sentence in that paragraph.
And then two, fractional amount to the town's affordable trust fund.
You might put municipality because I think it could be a city too, right? So
Now with Cheryl mentioning affordability, that we have affordability in two separate areas.
Yeah, so they can be combined.
I was gonna say, should we take this language and put it up where Cheryl's is, or move
Yeah.
Cheryl's down?
No, because we're gonna use Cheryl's formatting,
Right.
so it can be moved up to Cheryl's.
yeah,
And then
like mine just gives like a little bit of commentary, and then so you could add these particular provisions there. I think that's what you just did.
Yeah.
Wait, can you just stop scrolling there, go back? I just wanted to see that last red sentence. You could say a municipality instead of a town, and then you could say may require. Not the just up the next line. I'm sorry, that sentence, but just where in case where the developments are 7 to 10 units or less, a municipality may require.
Did you mean to say 7 to 10? Shouldn't it be just
Yeah, I was,
7 or 10?
again, I was back and forth.
Yeah.
Boston said 7, but then I was reading Cheryl's and she said 10, so that's why I'm like, oh, I'll just put 7 to 10 and then we can discuss.
So make
I
that
think you could just make that 7 there.
Yeah.
At this point now. And then you put 17% rather than 10 to 17%. And then, sorry, back up to your first red sentence, a town again, just say a municipality.
Okay, that's,
Do we really need though the black part of that in there, which is their language? I think what we really just want to do is show what we want added, right? And the same thing under B up above.
I think I did that for my
yeah.
own.
Yeah. So then you could get rid of the request there, or just change the request to the 3 red points. Right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it would no longer be in red.
Well, here you might say requested changes too. because these are more specific than, I don't know, we could change all of mine to be requested changes also, same language, but. And then you might, yeah, I think that's fine.
And then my modification 3 was HLC changed the definition of a subway. So I changed it back.
Yeah, so that's one that I wouldn't support. I'm sure the others of you or have a different view than I do, but
Yeah, I mean,
I would say, instead of not saying, I would say excluding. Instead of not including.
Yeah.
Just say-
So does everyone but Cheryl want to keep it in?
yeah, I'm on board with that one.
What was above the modification 3? Did we skip?
Above modification
Oh, okay.
3
Oh,
was
sorry.
affordability.
Okay, that was the affordability. All right. Because I didn't see the length of restriction. That was in there before. Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's what I wanted to put in. Yeah, thanks for. So I wanted to make sure that a deed restriction is in perpetuity.
well, again, here you can just modify this to say may be placed because you're allowing the zoning or to include that.
Yeah, so the towns can make up their own mind. So that
Correct.
goes up to the affordability too.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think the way Meredith described it, she was going to move all of these
Okay.
to behind, but yeah.
It's a modification 4.
So this goes back to what I had said.
So we just need to make sure we renumber these two, just like these,
Mhm.
what's modification for,
Right.
because I had started a
Yeah.
numbering system too, just for
Right.
consistency, right?
Yeah, so my modification 4 was just an opportunity for the town and HLC to work together. We've heard publicly from both the AG and the governor that they want to work with towns. So I'm kind of trying to hold their feet to the fire, and I would like them to work with us. And I know, Cheryl, that could be a lot of work for them, but they've publicly stated that that's what they would like to do. So that's kind of what I was thinking. So under.
Yeah, I guess my only concern is that that we're asking them to negotiate with each town, and then there could be a question of the fairness of that. So like a town that went before another town might have gotten treated one way and so there's already a lot of towns who are compliant, right? So now they would say, oh, we didn't get to go in and negotiate. We just had to follow the regs.
They could have.
Also, actually, a lot of towns that followed the regs are not creating a lot of new housing. They put their zoning over existing just to become paper compliant. So if we're looking for future, what if a town, had, or a city had an opportunity and they wanted to talk to HLC about it?
Oh, so you've changed the language of this from a lot. So let me just reread this.
Yeah, because I was trying to make it simple.
So what's the process then that you're suggesting here? I'm looking at it. It says that the process by which, but what's the process? The issue is there should be a pathway. But don't they already allow for a process to work with them in the leading up to adopting for example, in 2023, Tim submitted draft zoning to them, and things along the way, like an agreement that East Milton Square and Granite Ave South would combining Granite Ave South with Granite Ave North would be deemed acceptable. East Milton Square as a district would be acceptable. So those were things that were agreed to in advance of any zoning being submitted to them for final approval. So they already have that in place, I think.
Oh,
So if we wanted a meeting right now, or we wanted to send them some idea about something, that could be done. That's what the letter, I think, when it says work with communities, that's what they're referring to.
yeah. Yeah, so that's a good point. I guess I was mostly looking at just the regulation, just the document, not all the external conversations that may or may not happen. And if you look at just our staff, they're amazing, but they have a lot going on and we're understaffed. So what if we miss an opportunity to make a phone call? Having something in the regulations would sort of, assure that we have an opportunity. People miss deadlines all the time, as you know. And so I would hate to miss out on something.
I'm just looking at the guidelines right now quickly to see if they cover this.
I think, Matt, I think what Cheryl was saying is we're not explaining what the process is. So I think if we wanted to include this, we could start with an MBA community may seek limited exception
Yeah, okay.
and take out the process by which, because I think that might
Yeah,
be.
so like in the guidelines, the ones that are considered emergency now, I guess. On page 17, they have a paragraph 5 that says assistance for communities implementing an action plan. And it says MBTA communities are encouraged to communicate as needed with EOHLC staff throughout the process of implementing an action plan and may inquire about whether a proposed multifamily zoning district complies with General Law Chapter 48, Section 3A, prior to a vote by the municipal legislative body to create or modify such a district. And then that's to be done on a form to be provided by EOHLC. And if a request is submitted at least 90 days prior to the vote of the legislative body, EOHLC shall respond prior to the vote. So I guess they've set up their process. And then also a request for determination of district compliance. So what you're asking for is actually some kind of a waiver process?
Yeah, so that, what you just mentioned is specifically for an action plan.
Yeah, because otherwise, if you don't have an action plan, then I guess you're deemed, I'm not sure how it's contemplated, because they have to accept your action plan, which tells them what you're going to do. So if we haven't, I think the first step we have to do is submit an action plan at some point in order for the process to begin a negotiation with them. You have to have an action plan. They might say it's not acceptable. I heard that 2 communities that submitted action plans last week were deemed not to be satisfactory to them. So they're going to have to go back and revise them. So that's, I think, where the negotiation piece happens at the action plan level. And then once everybody agrees to the plan, the path, then it's sort of an interim review along the way of how it's being developed. They will continue to review. I don't see how they can grant exceptions, honestly, because what would be the criteria and how would that be a fair process, I guess. But that's my view on it.
Yeah, and I took that as, and maybe incorrectly, paragraph 5 of the regulations. The action plan was the action plan that was due last week. So, but you're interpreting it as not the action plan that was due last week. It was just a general action plan for us moving forward. So when
we're going to have to be we have to develop a zoning district at some point, right? And before we do that, we have to have an action plan that they approve. So the action, it doesn't, I think what you're saying is, we've not agreed to the action plan because there's some question about the classification, but at some point we will have to have an action plan.
okay.
So I don't think this is necessary.
Well, if that is correct, and paragraph 5 of the regulations create a process.
Yeah, it's really the whole 72.09 determination of compliance, but it goes into this process. And I pulled from paragraph,
Yeah.
subparagraph 5 in there.
So do we think we should take out this modification language?
So we probably could, if
Okay.
if you think that there's a process for us.
I think there's a process for us to review an action plan with them that we would make arguments about some things that you'd think would want to be negotiated.
Okay.
So maybe all that is covered in 7209.
All right, water and sewer. Section of the regulation leaves any town open to litigation from the developer who can develop.
So
I think this is good. I think the language is vague regarding water and wastewater infrastructure.
Yeah, I like this one a lot.
because they were, I feel like, putting the responsibility on the town to,
Don't forget that what we were told by Chase Berkeley in 2023 was that the DPW engineering can deny a project now, and they could deny a project under MBTA zoning if there wasn't adequate utility or infrastructure available for that project. So then if the developer says, okay, it's going to be denied, but they can have an opportunity to improve the infrastructure. So, I don't think, we need to look at this language again. I looked at it earlier, but I think there might be some changes.
So how does that apply to the Falcone project in East Milton Square? Right, that's what, 99 units?
And what do you mean?
Well, I
Was
thought-
there an inadequate water supply or sewer supply or sanitary supply there?
Exactly, and if there's not.
They
um,
had
I
to,
don't-
they had to verify that there was, and it
Yeah.
was, the DPW deemed it sufficient on that project.
Because they can get denied a building permit at the building permit stage. Remember, we're talking
That's right.
about,
I forgot.
we're
Yeah.
talking about zoning here, not the building permit stage. And zoning is only one aspect of it. So remember, the historic district requirements, the conservation, wetlands, conservation commission and wetlands requirements still apply, and so do the town review at the building department level for adequate capacity.
yeah, I just didn't want it to fall on the town. That's why I took the word the municipality out of it.
I just think I don't think it's necessary from what was explained before and what my explanation just now was.
Yeah, I'm just so. The Falcone project goes up. I'm just walking it through, right? And then a second one goes up, and then 440 Granite goes up, and then. So what, the fourth or fifth project then can't support, or the infrastructure can't support the fourth or fifth project, and then that developer's on the hook?
Right. Unless the town decides that they can get grant money, to improve it, and they want to have that project go through, so they'll apply for the grant money.
Yeah, there might be grant money.
Well, that's what some communities have done, Jim.
Oh, no, I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
What I'm reading about grant money is that the state's pretty broke, and I think grant money is drying up. But that might not be the case in 10 years. I'm just thinking right now. I mean,
I
it
don't know,
might,
they just announced $1 billion of grant money, but in any case,
wait, repeat that. What $1 billion in grant money?
remember when they announced the grant money that we would be ineligible for? There was
Yeah,
a whole
$1
list of
billion.
that, it was $1 billion, so when I added it up,
Yeah, so is that money even available now with all the federal cuts to the state? I just wonder. Anyway, it might be nice to have this, just to touch on this. It's not like a regulation, it's just sort of something to watch out for.
To comment, I would suggest reducing how much of what we have written here, because we probably don't really have to get into commenting on whether a town is open to litigation or not litigation. Here's what I suggest. If we just worked with the last two sentences, and this paragraph reads, the language is unclear about what is required of the developer, the municipality, and the Commonwealth. And then simply say, if the existing infrastructure is insufficient, the town should be able to limit the amount of density in that location.
That's good.
So Cheyenne, I'm going to say that again. If the existing infrastructure is insufficient, the town should be able to limit the amount of density in that location. And before you dump everything, I would highlight everything from support all the way to the top. I'm suggesting we get rid of that, from support to the top. But just before you get rid of it, let's make sure that we might have to add a little bit more here, do we? If the existing infrastructure, do we have to define that? If the existing public works infrastructure, would that sound right? That would probably cover what our concern is.
You could say municipal utilities and infrastructure.
Okay, good. Maybe instead of able, we should say allowed. The town should be allowed.
And then I don't think we should suggest the language changes. I just don't think you can put in a regulation, a shall, when other towns may not like that.
Say it again.
The change that is proposed to make private developers shall support the cost, I don't think that should be in a regulation. I don't think that change.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
It's fine, you can get rid of shall.
May is what they have, right? And may is appropriate, I think.
Yeah, I was just trying to get the burden off the town, that's all.
So I don't think we need to include this paragraph. I think you could just do what those two sentences at the top and
But I would say where the modification 5 is referencing.
okay, yeah, I agree. So you could say section
72.
7205, right?
I agree. Yep.
Are we still deleting the highlighted?
So you could
portion?
say the language in section 7205, section 3E is unclear. And then I think you could get rid of the rest down below.
And do we keep the highlighted yellow, or I was
Oh, no,
suggesting.
I agree with
get
you.
rid-
Take that
yeah.
out. Yeah. And I think take out this as well.
But then it doesn't follow the same format
Formatting, yeah.
as the Quest. We had the,
The issue is the request. I see what you're saying.
so if you go up, there's an issue and then the request is to fix
Right.
it.
So you could just break that into two sentences. So the issue is the language is unclear. The request is to allow this. It's letting them, like in mine, I didn't give them specific language. I just got the concept across. This is the same idea here. Is you're just getting the concept across and letting them work on the language.
I sort of was thinking when we write our permits, we always like to hear the suggested language because then it's easier for them and they don't have to come up with it. That was just my thinking.
Yeah. I think that in some areas that's makes sense, and some less so.
And the last modification is
But you have a commentary there that just there.
yeah, it is
I don't think that's accurate, slashing the capacity.
I would, I was gonna say, I don't think I would use that.
I don't think it's accurate either, Because it was just, that was
Reduced.
done way back when they were developing the guidelines, and that's not,
Correct. So this is just what we've heard, you know, I'm taking in all sorts of information from what we've heard. And this was one of
But-
them.
that's just, I don't remember the answer to that, but in detail, but Tim had told us that that just wasn't true. It wasn't that towns had anything slashed. So I don't know when you'd have to support that, where, with what? I mean, it's just a statement that doesn't have any reference to how, where, or how that happened.
Right. So under, so you're right, that could be, my commentary could be slash, but under 72.05, there is, if I look up the regulations, 72.05, D, titled "The Methodology for Determining a Multifamily Zoning District's Multifamily Unit Capacity." So in that section, the methodology to determine unit capacity was, you know, all the percentages. And so I was thinking that we could, you know, which we have done, was to have a written petition to request an exception. Which that is sort of what we're trying to do now. We've requested, I think the selectmen have requested a meeting. And so the reasoning for the request is under 72, is because of 72.05, because we're questioning their methodology for determining the unit capacity. So that was sort of just my thinking there. Because I have not seen any documentation where they've come up with, or where they started with the percentages at like 5, 10, 15, 25%. Like where did that come from? You know, why didn't they come up with like 3% or, you know, I just haven't found the justification anywhere. And I've asked, I actually asked, and no one has provided it to me. You know, or why didn't they go to 50%? I was just questioning the methodology for determining it.
I thought it was tied to the T somehow, but you're right. I mean,
But they don't, I think it's a
when-
fair question of like, why 25, why 15, why 10, why 5? But is it I don't know, I think it's just a question that could be posed to them rather than any change in the guideline, Maggie? Like, provide the rationale, you know, and based on what we've provided for, you know, comments about how, I mean, I really think like the beginning part of my comments where we really have tried to work with these guidelines, you know, to see how they could work, and we're finding things that are challenging. So one of them challenges is, as you said, Jim, is the 25%. You didn't tie it to whether it's a subway or anything else. You just said the 25%, right? So I think asking for the justification for the 25% is fair. It's keeping it outside of a subway definition.
Yeah. So can we do that under modification 6? Instead of saying please add, just state 7205 is the methodology for determining a multifamily zoning district's capacity, and the request is to provide the rationale.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the guidelines and I see it as 2B table 1 has the percentages.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
Yeah.
So I think that would be the reference.
Yeah.
And then I think here, oops, I don't mean to have my hand up. You could refer back to, Jim, I think, some of your language could be incorporated here, in terms of the challenge of the 25%, if we want to go back and take a look at that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that at the end. I just didn't want to keep you guys up all night. The only thing I'm toying with is how to not tie our hands to 25%, but maybe you guys can all help me with that.
Yeah, so we don't mention 25%.
Mhm.
So we mentioned
Uh,
2.05 is titled Determining Reasonable Size.
Well, under B in 72.05, subparagraph B is where table 1 is with the percentages, the
Yeah.
percentage of total housing units. So that paragraph starts, a reasonably sized multifamily zoning district must also be able to accommodate a reasonable number of multifamily housing units as of right. And then they go into the unit capacity based on these percentages, right? So they're I guess the fair question is, how did they arrive at those percentages? And had they considered, situations in which towns are fully built out in close proximity to their transit, and they also have a lot of excluded land. I mean, we have the Neponset River, right? So we have PCR land, et cetera. I mean, this is something we spoke about early on in this. And I think you could add, Jim, what you said about other excluded uses like colleges and private schools, because we have those as well. One thing I would say, though, in your comment about that, you put churches in there too, and we are allowed to do churches, so those are not excluded. But the other things you noted are excluded.
Wow, once again, I didn't think we were allowed to do churches.
Well, we have 3 in the Blue Hill Ave district right now, or in what, not right now, but what was in the district before that was passed, that HLC accepted.
Okay, so can
Right.
we give Cheyenne some language here? So my modification 6 can be changed to the issue is the 7205B minimum multifamily unit capacity.
Right.
The minimum multifamily unit capacity. You can get rid of all my commentary.
All this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can get rid of that.
All of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then would any of that apply? So the issue is we are questioning and I don't know how to put this because it's a regulation.
Yeah, I'd say we'd take out a regulation there, and that's in red,
Yeah.
and ask for the rationale for the 25% and ask for a reconsideration of that based upon some of the things that we've already highlighted, but some of the things that Jim points out as well.
So the request is for an explanation of table 1, the percentages in table 1.
Right.
I mean, specifically a justification of the, yeah, I guess an explanation, yeah.
And then, if we go to Jim's language, which I think Cheyenne got rid of already, but we have it.
I have it up on the screen.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I don't think she ever permanently gets rid of it.
yeah.
So dive right into the second sentence, you think, when looking at the developable area within the half-mile radii?
Well, I think you could say the 25% percentage of total housing units requires Milton to zone for. So,
But we're also questioning all the percentages, not just 25.
okay. All right. So then we would say you get rid of that first sentence, yes. So you'd want to take the second sentence. You want to go back to Jim's comments.
Mhm.
I think the overlapping radii is another one that we could include.
Just this first line,
I think the whole paragraph.
the whole paragraph.
So we'll have to edit it. We'll put it
Yeah,
down.
well,
You can put it there and come back. Yeah.
So, because this is specifically to Milton, how can we make it so it's not specific to Milton?
You could say the close proximity of transit stations.
To,
Concentrates,
I guess transit.
yeah, transit.
So I'm-
asset.
this also is talking about the trolley. So I'm not sure if we even want to talk about the overlapping
Okay.
trolley stops.
So basically.
But I think the other things that you mentioned, all the parkland, all the conservation land, we should include that.
Keep it general, general.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's fine.
So you can say.
Yeah,
to-
as the planning board tries to place units around.
I would say as the planning board, we're not placing units, we're determining zones,
Zoning.
zoning districts. Just but the rest of that sentence I agree with. So we just need to modify that language a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah, do it, please.
We're taking out place and replacing that with,
Yeah.
Zoning. Zone units.
okay.
Around the municipality.
Well, I mean, here you could say is if we don't want this to be tied, well, we are using Milton as the example, right? So I think it's
Say Milton is challenged.
Yeah, but other towns could be challenged too,
Yeah.
because
It
we've
is a
got,
challenge, you could say, yeah, in general, it is a challenge.
I think we should say as the planning board, or as the town, or the municipality, or whatever. Um,
Yeah, because we do refer to Milton up above.
yeah, I think we should say, instead of tri-state zone units around the municipality, determine the locations for multifamily zones.
multifamily districts.
Districts, yeah, that's fine too.
Yeah, delete that.
Are challenged.
Say Milton is challenged.
With many acres.
Well, maybe we could say Milton is uniquely disadvantaged.
Do we know that we're unique, though? Do we know all the other towns?
We can say it and let them tell us we're not. We believe we are, right? Don't you believe we're uniquely disadvantaged?
I think we're challenged. I don't know that I'd say
I
disadvantaged.
do uniquely challenged.
Well, if you look at everything collectively, right? So you have half of your transit area in Boston or underwater. Then to the south, when you take advantage of half the units can be spread throughout the town, you have Milton Academy, which takes up a ton of acreage. And then you have 7,000 acres of the Blue Hills. We are
Curry
unique.
College, yeah, Fontbonne.
If you add in Curry College and in the small parcel on Fontbonne, we get really limited really quick. So I think we are at a severe disadvantage.
I think uniquely challenged
That's good.
is good, because
Okay.
we want this to apply to other communities as well, these comments. If we do it, that it only applies to Milton, I think it's not likely to get considered the same way.
Mhm. Okay, so is that our last?
Can we just go back and see that real quick, the
Yeah.
last part of that sentence? Yeah, okay.
Okay, and we'll take out the below. Yeah, that.
Yeah, sorry for my formatting, Cheyenne. That was all messed up.
No, it's okay.
I'm used to driving a Bobcat. Doing a word
Okay.
doc.
So do we have so we need to renumber these.
Well, the only other thing, is it worth mentioning the FAA, the airplane noise as it relates to MBTA zoning? Cindy Christensen made a great point, and I don't know if she's going to send anything in.
I don't personally know enough about that law to know if we are in violation of that.
I looked that up
Yeah.
today, that federal regulation that was referenced, and it's like a very short couple of bullet points. So, and I don't know enough either to say something's in violation of it.
Well, the way I understand it is the MBTA Communities Act has to take into account the FAA's Reauthorization Act of 2024. But they just have blown it off.
Well, I looked up that federal regulation today. Section 787, reducing community aircraft noise exposure.
Yes.
And it's mostly talking about flight procedures. So which is not related to zoning, but there are three. I can just read it quickly. In implementing or substantially revising a flight procedure, the administrator shall consider the following actions. To the extent that such actions do not negatively affect aviation safety or efficiency, to reduce undesirable aircraft noise. So right there, to the extent, I mean, who determines that extent? 1, implement flight procedures that can mitigate the impact of aircraft noise based on a consensus community recommendation. 2, work with airport sponsors and potentially impacted neighboring communities in establishing or modifying aircraft arrival and departure routes. 3, in collaboration with local governments, discourage local encroachment of residential or other buildings near airports that could create future aircraft noise complaints
There it
or
is.
impact airport operations or aviation safety. But it doesn't say anything about flight paths. And you say in yours,
Sure,
Jim, that you're under a flight path, but it depends where you put the district if you are, and that's up to the town where they put the district.
Yeah, so I mean, by not mentioning it, I think it's definitely worth mentioning. I mean, it depends on where you put the district. I mean, I think one district is definitely going either on Milton in the village or Elliott Street or down by Mattapan, which is what's the lowest area of the flight path. So I think it's
Which
worth.
flight path? There's do you have the flight paths?
Well, the one that goes over my house and goes over the Neponset River is lower at the Neponset River than it is at my house. And when I lived on Mark Lane, it was higher at Mark Lane than it is here. I mean, just look up.
Yeah, but that's
You want me to
not
specify a latitude and longitude? I cannot, but clearly.
no, but a map. I mean, if we're submitting a comment that are we trying to say we have control over where we put the districts? We're asking for control over where we put the districts. Are we saying that we want HLC to mandate to us that we consider this?
No, we want.
What are we asking HLC to do to tell us where to put our district?
Classify us as 10% instead of 25%, so we zone for less under the airplane noise affected areas affected by airplane noise, so there's just less complaints.
Well, if anything, I think if anything, then this would go back under the question of the 25%.
Yeah, and
Or other towns that are in flight paths. Any other town like Winthrop that has planes flying overhead or taking off. I mean, you can make it general. It's just one more argument to try to get a lesser classification,
yeah,
which the
so
whole thing is about.
is this a place to get to make that argument? Is just my question. I don't know enough about it either, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so I think we should let Cindy submit her comments where she can explain it. Meredith, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I would be more comfortable letting a citizen enter that in without knowing more about this.
Okay, fair enough.
But I appreciate it. I appreciate that.
So actually, I forgot, I had one other question. Was under this, the table 1, like under 7205, under the table 1, it says, under 1A, for the purpose of this, the numbers of total housing units in each MBTA community has been established by the reference to the most recently published US decimal census of population and housing. So the question I have is, are we going to have to be, like, I believe a census is taken every 10 years. Every 10 years, do we have to come back and rezone and our housing stock increases? And we'll have to amend our zoning because of the of this increase. And I went on, today, what did I do? I went on our town's website to find out the demographics of the town, and the information is based on MAPC. So I went to the MAPC site, and listed by town is a breakdown of all the demographics of every town. And they reference not the 2020 census, but the 2010 census. So MAPC's information isn't even up to date. So I called MAPC today and asked them, I left them a message to call me back if they had the 2020 census. And also on their chart, the headers are labeled incorrectly too. So I'm not sure if they know about that. But I haven't talked to them. But my question was more, are we gonna have to change our zoning every 10 years? And maybe that's, I don't know if we put that in this, or if it's just a general question.
I don't know.
Mhm.
I didn't see, I thought once you're adopt the district that you're compliant, but I didn't see where it's something that you have to continue
Update.
to
Yeah.
update.
I don't think they could do that. I don't think they could. But you never know.
Yeah, I mean, that they could force another mandate in 5 years if this thing isn't, if not enough housing's being developed. I think that's kind of why they want to track the ADU progress at the building departments, is to see if ADUs are actually being built. And if not, maybe they'll amend their laws.
Yeah, so that was just another, like, what's their rationale, I guess, was for that, or what's their intent?
So 72.10 says ongoing obligations, rescission of a determination of compliance. And it lists, if you amend your compliance zoning at any point, you have to go back to them. But also, if HLC determines that the town or the community had submitted inaccurate information or had failed to notify them of zoning amendment, anything that materially alters the minimum land area, the officials don't issue building permits. It does say is an MBTA community with an approved multifamily zoning district has changed transit category as a result of a newly opened or decommissioned transit station or the establishment of permanent regular service at a transit station where there's formerly intermittent or event-based service. So if there is change to the transit service, there is opportunity for change. But it doesn't say anything about census as an opportunity for change.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, personally, this sort of seems like a lot of work for HLC. You know, it just they're overcomplicating things.
So I have just one thing. Can we go back to what we're requesting for the minimum acreage? Where we put to 2 acres. I'm wondering if this is not a method for easier assemblage for developments with some of the smaller parcels.
The one thing to think about, Meredith, with this is a sub-district is where you can set your parameters.
Right.
So if there's like here, if we wanted this for example, the one that's on the screen. If we wanted the paper mill to be able to have higher density, but we didn't want some other things nearby to have the higher density, then it allows us to have smaller sub-districts that can have different dimensional requirements. That's the way I would think about it.
Right.
Which I think makes sense given our parcel sizes.
Mhm.
You know, Meredith, I do think you have a point. But if we choose districts where we think multifamily housing should go, then even if
Right.
they assembled parcels, at least it's in a district where we think it makes sense.
Sure. Right. Okay, I just wanted to make sure and not that they would go to 2 acres. I mean, I think we would be lucky if they go to 4 or 3, but
Yeah, they may,
just,
but
Yeah.
I think like this one is under 3, or it's just over 3. But then when you take out, this is why I wasn't quite sure about 2.5 or 3, because if you take out, I think some of it's not considered developable. So then you might drop below the 3, or you might even drop below the 2.5.
Right.
This is where,
but that is a good site. Yeah, so
yeah,
want
I
to
just wanted to
build.
make sure you could pick up something like this.
Mhm.
And Granite Ave North by itself.
Yeah, the other good site is Milton Food Mart site.
Mhm.
That little
No one's touched that.
is
Mhm.
site, and even the Milton Yoga site.
Well, those as mixed use that's where having a smaller sub-district size makes sense for us,
Yes.
you know?
All right. So Cheyenne, can we take all of this? I mean, I'm not sure which is easier for you to move all of what Cheryl has, take out Dear Secretary Augustus. Um,
Do you want from the map down or all of this included?
yeah, we had talked about keeping that in.
Okay.
No. Keep the map.
But maybe, Cheryl, are you comfortable with saying, just going back up above the map? If we keep that in, I would think that we should say
I definitely think that
transits,
you could change like trolley to transit, but I think
transit, that's what,
this commentary I think is important because it sets the rationale for some of the
Right.
changes.
so I would say transit. Yeah, I think that's,
Get rid of Mattapan.
Yeah, so we're just using the word transit or we're doing transit stations?
Transit.
okay. So, and this would go under number 3 for the suggested modifications.
Yeah, above where mine starts.
So Meredith, can we just at least talk about like the language you have so people who might be interested in seeing it? I spoke about it before, but can you explain why you think it's important to talk about an action plan that's related to February 13th date, which is already passed?
I just think it's important for us to address with HLC the position that Milton is in, and what we're challenged with, and why we did not submit
But
the
it's
action
the town
plan.
administrator who is required to
Yeah.
submit it, not the planning board.
Well, I think it's all our town. So it's a
But we
summary
only
of
have
where we
certain
are in this
authority.
process because we're charged with the zoning. The planning board is charged with this.
And the select board is
Mhm.
charged with legal aspects. We are not
right.
charged
So if
with
we're
any of
found
the
to
legal
be-
aspects.
So if we're found to not be compliant, we have defensible arguments.
What do you mean defensible arguments? This is legal. We're zoning, we're not legal.
It's what HLC has asked of Milton. So I'm not gonna,
Yeah, I mean, I guess,
I know you don't agree with it. So
yeah.
I think everybody's
I'm
read
trying to
through
have
this.
you explain it so you can explain to people why it should be here. People in the public who are very interested in what the boards are
Mhm.
doing on this. People have a lot of questions about why there's no
Yeah.
public process around any of this. And
Well, a
we
lot of it
spend a
is
lot
the
of time
argument.
talking about a lot of
Right.
detail comments, but we haven't,
Mhm.
other than my commentary, you haven't explained like the language that you've supplied, like I did, like Jim did, and like Maggie
Well,
did.
I know you had that one question. Did you have specific areas that you want me to go through?
Well, there's, like I said, at least the first 2 pages and then sort of scattered within are
Summary, yeah.
legal questions, which aren't pertinent to, in my mind, to commenting on the regulations, the language themselves. And
I think it's both important, and it was what we had wanted to submit with our action plan as part of our comments. And I know, I'm sorry you weren't there at that meeting, but we did thoroughly discuss this at that meeting.
So I was a little disappointed that the selectmen chose not to you know,
Submit our action plan.
submit our actions in our appendix. And it's just getting a little frustrated that we spend a lot of time. Like we all spend a lot of time. And I don't like to waste my time. And it is frustrating, like it or not, there are people out there who, want us recalled. And I understand they're frustrated because they don't like our point of view, but we still spend a lot of time. A lot of time we think about it, we talk about it, we have uncomfortable conversations with people. And so I was disappointed that the selectmen didn't add it, because, why bother having a planning board, really, quite frankly? Or why have any committee, and even, this is my frustration with even the whole MBTA Act. Like, why do towns really gonna need planning boards in the future if they're just gonna mandate by executive order what we should be doing? So I kind of agree with Meredith. And I'm sorry, Cheryl, you weren't there. We all can't make every single meeting. And, I think we should, because we spent time on it. And our time and our efforts should be recognized, I think.
I did spend time on it too, and I sent you my comments.
Yeah.
And we have some disagreement, as we've had for a long time, about the classification, but I also I think the reason that there's public criticism is that there hasn't been a very transparent and public process related to this, and I think that falls on the select board in terms of having a lot of executive session around discussing next steps after the court decision. But I've said for some time that I think we need some public process on this, and I hope we're going to, before we're done, we're going to discuss scheduling a public forum so that, and what we intend to accomplish on the 13th when we get to utility contract. And I want to make sure we get to that.
I know, and it's almost 10. That's why
yeah.
I don't want to litigate everything in here. So.
What I say is, it sounds like you all want to include language that you discussed at a meeting. As I told you, I couldn't even get the tape to comment, or don't have comment on it. I wasn't a participant in it, but I disagree with the portion that you've submitted, Meredith. So I guess for me, I'm glad that we had discussion and agreement on the other technical points of this. But I'm not comfortable with the overall letter because of the inclusion of all of that. But you know, I've already expressed my concern about that. So
I appreciate that.
yeah.
Okay, so Cheyenne is cleaning it up as we speak, which we'll need to do for consistency. But I would entertain a motion that we do send both the draft commentary letter, parts 1, 2, and then include as section 3 the language that Cheryl and Maggie have provided.
Sorry, what's section 1 and 2?
So from my draft, from the earlier, so it all looks like one document.
Oh,
So
I
it would
see
be
the
the
process
comment letter to
summary and then
HLC, Milton Planning Board letter, comment letter to HLC, which includes a process summary 1, and then with respect to the statute's words, and then section 3 would be further suggested modifications. And then we would also include the UTIL's map, which is the half-mile area. Half-mile within the commuter line map. So it would read as all one document.
So I make a motion to submit this one document from the planning board to HLC regarding their emergency regulations.
It's HLC. Yeah. Is there a second?
Sure, I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion further?
No, the only discussion is Cheyenne is cleaning up. I think like under mine, Cheyenne, we had issue, and under Cheryl's we don't. So if you need
Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
was because some of them,
the way
I mean, we
mine
could just
is,
take it out.
gonna just
Yeah.
take-
That's and yes, and subject to Cheyenne's
formatting changes.
formatting changes. Yeah.
Cheryl's also had titles on it. Did you want to keep that and then name the rest of them or not put titles on Cheryl's? For example, it would be like district locations, portability, but then when we get into Maggie, they were just titled like modification 1.
Yeah. Should we put modification affordability? Yeah. We could just follow her format and sort of just bold,
Mm-hmm.
sort of where Maggie had issue, we could
Yeah.
just put in bold and make that as a title, read as a title.
Okay. And then I'll send out a final clean copy tomorrow morning.
Okay. That would be great. Okay, so roll call vote on this. Sean,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Maggie,
Yes.
Cheryl,
no.
okay, and myself, yes. Okay. All right. Thank you all, and I respect your opinion, Cheryl. So thank you, and thank you for the work that you added to this, and everybody else too. So all the
Hard work. I'm sorry, sometimes we don't always agree, Cheryl, but you do put so much work into it, and I thank you for that.
great.
Well, I think everybody put a lot of thought into it. So we just have a difference of viewpoint on a big chunk of this, but I think once we get down to the detail, there's a lot of agreement.
Okay. All right. So that was a big item. Discussions of util, the budget contract. Cheyenne, do you want to touch on this?
Sure. So
We don't have, I know we don't have a sort of an updated contract yet, but
yeah. I met with Zoe yesterday. And I had asked her in advance of the meeting just kind of like scope of work and if we wanted to amend the contract, things like that. So we do have them coming back March 13th just to kind of give a recap and touch base on where we left off and where we can go from here. In terms of budget, she mentioned we have just under 25,000 remaining for the contract. She mentioned if we were staying on track with where we left off and only made minor tweaks, the money that we have in the contract should be enough to take us through. But if we wanted to basically rework everything we've been doing, we'll have to come up with more funds for that. And the 25,000 does include up to 6 planning board meetings and a community forum. I think as of now, she suggested that we kind of keep weekly check-in meetings for now. And then she suggested, let me pull it up. She suggested that you guys might want to include more planning board meetings that are specifically just for MBTA communities. Just because, by the time we get to MBTA communities, it's this time of night. So she had suggested that as well. And there was one other thing she suggested.
So just
Um,
clarification, you said that it allows for 6 planning board meetings. So
Yep.
those 6 planning board meetings, are those for like if we have a set designated meeting?
No,
No, so those 6 planning board meetings are for what, an hour of her time each, maybe?
yeah. So like when we have them come on and do their presentations and stuff like that. That's the 6 that we were discussing at the time. And then she suggested like the designated meetings after the fact. So I'm assuming that would be like a separate thing.
so
Um,
basically we've used about half of our original contract, and the contract runs through May.
yes, it does.
So Cheyenne, have we used all of the grant funding now? And so everything that we would do would be from a planning board budget?
Um, I'd have to check in with Julia in our system just to see how much we'd have left in the planning board budget. But she said under the current contract that we have with them, we have 25,000. So I don't think that that's
We haven't had to dip into our planning board budget yet.
I thought
No,
last
not
meeting
too
we
much.
had to dip in 4,000, right?
Yeah.
I believe we're still in the high 40s for that, but we're not like in the 25,000 range.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did, it's Julia. We
did.
did dip into the planning board budget for that last payment for util. So there's gonna have to be some rearranging of the budget for that.
So from the planning board budget of 50,000 for this fiscal year, we just approved 6,000 for a contract extension from MAPC.
Mhm.
And Julia, you said we used 4,000 for the util work. And I'm just trying to understand how much money we have left. Do we have 40,000 left?
I'll have to do a report tomorrow and I'll email it to you.
Okay.
But the last, but the last invoice we had from Util, we had to split between the contract that we have with them and with our own, 50,000 planning board budget.
Okay, so you anticipate moving forward that it will all need to come from planning board budget for the next 24,000?
I'll check with accounting because they have a magical way of moving things around. But yeah, at this point, I would say it would be pulled from our budget.
So I think it's important for us to consider what Cheyenne said that Zoe said, which is if we study something completely new from what they've been studying, then they won't be able to stay within that budget. And we're just going to have to be mindful how much budget we've got available. And the
Right,
other thing I would say, sorry, Julie, just one other quick thing, is that that doesn't include an economic study, which is currently still required for going above 10% affordability.
Don't we already have that in the works?
We
Study?
put it, yeah. I believe we had put that out. They started the work and then we never continued with it.
But did we allocate the money? I mean, they couldn't start the work without the money, right?
Yeah, Julia, could you follow up on that too? Because that was a question I also had.
Yes.
Because there was work, he was definitely doing work for us on that.
Yeah, I'll check in with accounting.
So I don't know if we have money left in that contract as well to continue.
Sure, I'll get the contract information tomorrow.
Great.
Zoe also had a question kind of going into the next meeting. She wanted to know if we were still considering looking at other sub-districts. So yeah, that was her main question.
So I think we probably are all in agreement that the paper mill site should be considered. So I don't know if that, Tim drew a map at one point, but I don't know if Util actually studied that.
They had it in the recent presentation, and one of the things that they said was that because it's not contiguous, you have the DCR property, and and it's not 5 acres. That they didn't know if that would, present a problem. I'm just getting their presentation out now. So,
now, would this require like Cheyenne reaching out to HLC just with a phone call to see, like Tim did before?
see, like, I don't know if you can see on my screen here, but they needed to pull across, to get to 5 acres. So I guess we'll see. I don't know how quickly we'll hear on the comment, once the comments close tomorrow, how quickly, they're going to make them final. But because they had to include those, the density denominator changed a little bit. I think it's worth going through everything that they presented to us here again. I'd like to suggest that we talk to them about the Blue Hills Parkway subdistrict, because you mentioned, I think, the food mart. I think our minimum lot size and other things that when I looked at this, gosh, a long time ago now, there were a lot of parcels that were excluded in that Parkway district because of the minimum lot size. So we can ask them to look at that, like we had them look at the Elliott Street corridor, and also whether we consider any boundary adjustment in that area too. So perhaps, I don't know, maybe all of us could look at the boundary for that sub-district again and see if there's something we'd like for them to look at. I just feel like that's one area we haven't looked at very carefully.
That would be the only one new that I think we would consider, because we have all the information from the others, including the Randolph Avenue.
So if we have to zone for 25%, I'd like to take a look at the Burr Estate, 175 Milton Street. It's going to have a huge density denominator, but there's a lot of excess land there. I'd like to look at, we keep talking about St. Pius, but I'd like to look at Woodmere Drive, which is in that area, which is, I'm not sure if it's 40 or 50 townhouse style units, but we could overlay zone that. And then I still want to come back to 648, 652 Canton Ave, which is 119, I think, units. So I think there's plenty more to look at. I mean, if we have to zone 10%, I think it's pretty simple. If we have to zone 25, we're gonna need to look at all those parcels.
We should get a 10% plan ready. It's what the select
Yeah.
board had directed us to do. We can continue to talk about 25, but that's inconsistent with what they've directed us to do.
I was going to say,
So-
that's what I would like to ask that UTL, given the districts that we currently have, putting together a 10% plan.
It's
Okay.
why I asked about the blue, and I said in my
Yeah.
comments to you before the meeting that you had that I couldn't attend, that we should look at the overlap district of the Blue Hills Parkway and the trolley because they overlap. And
Yeah.
so looking at that parkway area, if we're talking about a commuter rail, that's within the walk of the commuter rail.
Yep.
The
I thought
idea
that was
that
a good
these
one to look
districts could be anywhere, but we also haven't had any public comments about it. So, you know, I do think, as I said before,
Mhm.
you can't assume that there aren't going to be people who are as outspoken against a place as there were in 2023 if you don't start the process. And so I'm just going to keep saying it
Yeah.
at every meeting until we get a public forum scheduled because I
Well, we have
don't
public
think.
comment. When we're
But we
discussing,
don't have
Cheryl,
public
Meredith,
comment on the agenda
We
tonight,
had
for
this
example.
we had this conversation in our last meeting. Let's prepare something and give them
Yeah.
something to comment on. We had this conversation, Cheryl.
Yeah, but right now Jim's saying, let's do this location, this location, this location. Well, let's get the public
Assuming it's
feedback on these
25%.
locations.
Right, that was assuming a 25% plan. If we're not gonna look at 25%, we can take 10% from the Milton Station and from the Elliott Street District that were voted on at town meeting in 2023. That
Yeah,
gets us
but the
to.
public should weigh in on whether they agree with that, since it's not,
We
now
voted
we're
for it
not.
at town meeting, Cheryl.
Yeah, but the
Already weighed
idea that you're already making a determination. You've said that it shouldn't be tied to the trolley. It should be tied to the commuter rail, and then it can go anywhere. But now you're saying, well, we should put it all by the trolley. It's contradictory.
okay. We're not going to
Question.
solve this tonight. Tonight was just discussion of UTL, the budget, but we have them on the 13th.
We do. So when I was talking to Zoe, we were kind of backtracking the timeline. She was thinking if we were going to do a community forum, we would probably have to do like April. Does that sound kind of on track?
Mm-hmm.
So April, there's a school vacation, so we should.
It was
And there's
the end
a-
of April, I think we were thinking.
Okay.
You know, I don't think my
Oh.
memory is incorrect. Didn't we agree that we were going to have UTL at the meeting on the 13th?
Yeah, they're coming.
And Cheryl, you agreed to that, and we were going to have the public comment after that, and we were going to work on that in the meeting on the 13th with UTL.
What else do we have on the agenda on the 13th?
Well, we now have
Because what I thought we agreed to was a special meeting, that we were going to hold a new meeting that would only be for the MBTA communities, and we're going to do it the first week of March.
Correct.
It wasn't going to be the 13th. It was
Well-
going to be a meeting dedicated just to this topic.
I have it as the 13th.
13th.
Yeah, I have no other meetings before the 13th. We probably should make that a priority.
Should
Because we
make it
already have-
six?
We did. This is what we talked about in the last meeting. We agreed to make that a priority, and we agreed to the date of the 13th.
Well, we're going to have a decision. We didn't do the Harland A&R. So we're going to have other things on the agenda. So we should put MBTA communities first.
That's exactly what you said the last time we met, and we agreed to do that.
Yes, and I did want to mention, Cheyenne, Peter Mello, actually called today and he wanted
Mhm.
to do a brief executive session. I don't know if he reached out to you.
No.
Just with an update to tell us what's happening with the litigation with the memory care, the abutters of the memory care,
Yes.
the ongoing litigation. He just wanted to sort of give us an update on where they are in that process.
Did he have a date for that or?
He was at the 13th. He said would work out perfectly. So
Oh,
I was going to mention that. So I was thinking we could put that on. And he said it's a very brief update. And do
Can I
the
can I
executive
ask?
session first.
I have a question. Let's continue with what we said. Let's make it a priority. If Peter's going to do that, let him join us at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
I know that might be a
Yeah.
little different than normally how we do things, but we keep doing this. We keep packing things in ahead of the MBTA issue. We don't allow enough time. The residents get frustrated because it's the last thing we talk about. Let Peter join us at 9 o'clock, and we'll take the first 2 hours of our meeting to work on this.
And he said that's fine. Actually, he said he could come at any point in our meeting. So
Good.
So we can put that on as a later agenda item. That's fine.
As far as the 572 Harlan, I mean, they were a no-show tonight. They don't have to be, they can
yeah.
be at the next meeting.
I did email Steve and he said the applicant or the attorney was gonna I saw a couple names in the participants, but nobody had raised their hand when Meredith had called him out. So I'll
All
probably
right.
call him tomorrow.
So maybe no-show is not the right term, but we don't, I mean, I really think we should prioritize the MBTA zoning.
Yeah, Jim, I'm with you.
Yeah.
The MBTA issue serves the entire town of Milton. That one particular resident is one resident. So I think we're better off to serve the entire town as a priority.
Yeah, so don't put him on the 13th. So the 13th should only be MBTA, Peter Mello, and Zero Blue Hill Ave. So our 13th meeting is now full.
Right.
The only thing we have to find out is if we have a requirement, and Cheyenne, maybe you should check on that. There is a time frame.
So even if there is a requirement, because they missed their slotted time of tonight, I think as long as they agree to an extension in writing, then the time requirement can be waived.
That's great. I'm all for that. I just wanted to make sure that we're within the time frame. Okay, great.
Do we
Okay.
need a vote on the contract amendment for UTL?
I don't think we have an amount yet.
Okay.
I'm
Can
not
I
sure.
just type in about the A&R? The person who filed the application was the surveyor. It wasn't the owner of the property, and he was told that it wasn't necessarily important for him to show up because it was a simple decision. It was just a little corner of the property for him to decide upon. So I just wanted to tell you that.
I mean, do we want to go take a and look at it, even though they're not here tonight, and just?
Well, so I guess that's a process question. Usually I'm assuming somebody presents, so an
Yeah.
applicant has to present it, right?
And the homeowner needs, yeah, we need,
I mean, I think it doesn't have to be an attorney, it doesn't have to be a surveyor, but the property owner who's
Mhm.
going to be taking a piece of property away, I guess,
yeah.
and conveying it to someone else. Somebody needs to speak to it, I think.
Okay.
But can we
So-
come back to, I'm sorry, just to be clear, we don't need a vote on the contract extension, is that right, Cheyenne?
So with the contract extension, I mean, we should maybe because at the very least, we did talk about extending it through the end of August just to accommodate the whole July 13th deadline with getting in compliance. So at least we need to go through August, but in terms of extra funds or current funds, that we won't know until we kind of run through the money.
Okay, so Meredith, I'll make a motion to approve the extension of UTIL's contract through the end of August with no additional funding requests at this time.
Second,
Okay, roll call, all in favor? Cheryl,
Yes?
Maggie?
Yep.
Yep. Jim,
Yep.
Sean,
Yes.
and myself, yes. So you've got the vote to do that. Okay. Great. Now let's move Thayer. So when we get to that, Maggie can just leave. So if we can move that to the end. And Cheyenne, if you just want to tee up this, it's pretty straightforward, the floodplain bylaw discussion.
Yes. So we had talked about it briefly back in January. Cheryl had a comment about the definitions and how they were different from what the bylaw had. So I took that, I went back. Let me share my screen. So before we get down there, we had changed these dates to accommodate the new map that we're going to be doing. And Eric from DCR said that these dates were fine. Here we just basically removed the addresses, so it is just the title and the working title of the person. Same thing with this section. And then here we just worked on the recreational vehicle section. And then going to what I mentioned before with Cheryl's comment, I went through and did track changes on what was different between the model bylaw and what we currently have. So it was just some of these little differences on here. I think it was only two. And then this portion, he said it was fine. I'm not too knowledgeable on all of these zones, but he said it looked great for our town.
Great. Thank you for.
Somebody had asked me about this, seeing that it was on the agenda, and I explained it was just really primarily for flood insurance purposes, but is that an accurate statement, Cheyenne?
Yeah, that's what I took it as. And
Okay.
then Cheryl and I had Alan look at. Oh, and that was another question. Cheryl had a question about the parcels in the letter that we received. So we had Alan go and look at that, and let me pull that up as well.
I was curious if it was adding parcels that weren't
Mhm.
in the flood zone before.
From what I took is, oh, I didn't pull up the email, but he had basically said that, actually, one second, let me get the email with the definitions. Sorry.
so just as a side note, as we're talking about flooding, at the Climate Action Committee meeting last month, our subgroup reported on flooding. We have a little subgroup, flooding subgroup. And one of their concerns was, how do we communicate to our residents about the risk to their properties? And the impacts of the flooding on our sewer and septic infrastructure still actually needs to be determined. So that subgroup is working with our DPW.
Great.
So just as an update.
So on our letter that we received, we had all of these parcels. And so he went through his GIS map and he was able to find out which ones of the list that they gave us were inside the flood zone, just the house, whether the parcel was outside or whether the parcel was inside, but either the house was um outside or partially inside. So he put that for us, um, or who recently got kicked out. And that is in the folder as well. So that was just round one of what he was going to do. And then he didn't mention what he was going to do for round two, but he has a round two.
So the reason I asked about this is what we had in our scorecard was a criteria that you would get lower points if the property was in a floodplain, right? So I wanted to see if our GIS mapping was consistent with the lists that DCR provided. And Alan confirmed that, right, Cheyenne?
Yes.
And I don't, and my recollection from his email was that there wasn't a significant change to the lots that were included. So that I think we could rely upon the GIS mapping to show what's in the flood zone. But I think we could confirm that with Alan.
Yeah, I'll talk to him tomorrow.
But as far as the communication, do you know if this list, these addresses, will get any notification, Cheyenne, from anyone?
I'm not sure if they got any notification. I know that we had somebody come in, well, they didn't come in, they emailed specifically regarding one parcel. I have to check to see if they're on this list, but I know that at least in their case, they were looking for parcel specific floodplain information, to which it took a lot of finding to figure out who actually handles that portion of the signatures, but we have had some people talk about it.
And Cheyenne, do you know where this map gets filed? Because I know just realtors do like to look it up, you know, if they're listing a property or representing a buyer looking at a property that may be in a flood zone, just to find out what the insurance requirements are.
Oh, I wasn't.
Sorry,
I was
do you
muted.
know if this goes
Yeah,
to
so I
the
think
DPW or who has this information?
to my knowledge, it just gets updated on the FEMA website, which I can send out the link.
Okay. It's good information for the residents to have. Okay, so basically this is fairly boilerplate. I think what we need to, what we'll need to do for next week, and since we're not meeting, is I would entertain a motion to submit both this article, and we had already voted, I think for our overlay zoning for East Milton, also to submit that for review to Peter Mello and the warrant committee for the May town meeting.
I make to move this article forward to May town meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll do a roll call on this. Maggie,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Okay, great. So Cheyenne, will you be able to forward those? You can
Yes.
do it Monday or at whenever you can. But I think the deadline is the 27th for submitting articles, so to the warrant committee. Okay, so we have one last item on our agenda, and this is simply just a revote of the submission. So
Log off.
I'll let you log off. Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Maggie.
Bye, Maggie. Okay, this is the vote that we took, and what we signed, the decision it was submitted without a date on it. So we are just resubmitting, and this time it will have a date on it. So
we need to go to sign a new document, Meredith, at town
We're
hall?
just, yeah, we're just doing a clean new document. So it is in the office. It's ready to sign and it will be dated as soon as the last person can get in to sign. I know Sean is out of town, so Monday would be the soonest that Sean could get in. But if folks could stop in tomorrow morning or Monday, that would be great.
Meredith,
To
what
sign.
time does the office close tomorrow? End of day?
We
What's end of
close
day?
at 1:30.
1:30.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be Monday for me.
I'm willing also to go door
yeah.
to door to drop it off at people's houses if they need to.
I won't put you through that, but I can sign it in the afternoon, probably mid-afternoon, Julia. But I don't. That's Meredith's call if we want to go to that length or just. I don't care. I'll do whatever you want.
If you can stop in, but Julia has offered to. She doesn't mind
I'll
getting
stop
out of the
in.
office.
I'll stop in
Getting out
tomorrow
of the
morning,
office
Julia.
is great.
I don't get back into Boston until around 1:30, so it would be after the office hours, Julia. But I know you sent me your cell number. I'll text you as soon as I get to town, and we can figure something out.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay.
That's great.
And I'll stop up tomorrow morning, Julia.
Great. So
Thanks,
can
Cheryl.
I have a motion to approve the decision as we had discussed at our what date meeting? We don't need to even say that. Just a vote to approve the Thayer Nursery special permit.
I'll make a motion to approve the Thayer Nursery special permit as discussed at our last meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call. Sean,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Thank you all, and thank you for going in and signing. And we will see you Monday.
I'll make a
Sounds
motion
great.
to adjourn.
Motion to it. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay. All right. Cheryl, yes.
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Great.
Real
See
quick,
Monday.
what time?
Thank
Mm.
What time Monday at the high school?
7:15.
7:15. All right.
I'm sorry. Is it 7:15? Is that what we said?
7:15.
Just 7:15. Okay, I just wanted to.
Yeah, 7:15.
Cool.
Also, I don't know if Nick mentioned to you, Meredith, but we have to record Monday and Tuesday. So I'll probably
Okay.
bring my work laptop, just so we can do like a quick Zoom recording.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night, everybody.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Bye-bye.